I believe sometimes the truth is crueler than a lie. Just so you know. I felt like Wilhelm was dodging the question, so I re-gripped my wooden sword and abruptly murmured, "Do you see any sword talent inside me?"
From where I stand, unfortunately, you have none. Your aptitude for the blade goes no further than the common man's, the same place as mine.
The strained, self-deprecating smile that came over Wilhelm made Subaru raise an eyebrow in surprise.
That's pretty humble coming from you, saying you have no talent with a sword.
It is the truth. I have no gift for it. If I did, I surely would not have had to wield one nearly as much. Therefore, it is possible for you to arrive at the same level as I.
Incidentally, how long would I have to work at it?
Nothing so great. You would only need to devote half your natural life to it.
Only he says. It was often said that continually striving to improve was true talent. In actuality, even with Wilhelm telling me that I could arrive at the same level, I couldn't fathom the drive to devote as much time to the sword as the old man, or a reason to do so. In the first place, the reason I had Wilhelm teach me like this was, I thought, like pouring myself into the sword without worldly thoughts might let me find enlightenment for the first time.
I wonder now, whatever you might grasp will not make you suddenly stronger after all, and I do not think a clear mind or lack thereof determines who will win and who will fall in the end.
Wilhelm dryly conveyed his opinion. Besides, he continued, if I must say so, I have rarely wielded my blade with a clear mind. Particularly when I first began, I had very few thoughts about the way of the sword.
So what did you think of?
My wife, and my wife alone.
Sheesh, Wilhelm, sometimes you really go on about that wife of yours.
Subaru remembered how he had spoken of his beloved wife when they had first met, but Wilhelm had also praised his bride to high heaven during Subaru's stay at the mansion. It must have been a harmonious marriage. Seeing Subaru break out in a strained smile at the latest episode of this behavior, Wilhelm rubbed his chin.
Someday you will reach a point where such preparedness is necessary to become stronger. Well, it's nothing you need to worry about at present, Sir Subaru.
What do you mean?
Subaru tilted his head slightly. Wilhelm shook his head a tiny bit at the gesture.
I simply mean that there is little point in lecturing someone about what it takes to become stronger when he has already abandoned the choice to do so.
For a moment, Subaru's face froze over, unable to comprehend what he was being told. However, the breakdown was momentary. He immediately shrugged, as if dismissing it as a joke.
Hey now, what are you saying all of a sudden, Wilhelm? I'm as surprised as a burglar who gets stopped before he actually steals anything. I've done what now?
If you are aware of it yourself, it would be inelegant to speak further of it. I have said what I wished to say. It would have been difficult to tell you had I let this opportunity slip by.
Wilhelm, speaking as if he understood everything, left no room for Subaru to pursue the matter. Unease smoldered in Subaru's chest. Wilhelm's words had left him with an undeniable sense of nervousness. And Wilhelm could tell exactly what that feeling meant. Instantly, that truth tore unbearably and mercilessly at the boy's heart. Subaru, sweating in the throes of a phantom chill, raised his head when Wilhelm looked toward the mansion and spoke.
Sir Subaru, it seems that this morning's practice is at an end.
When Subaru followed his gaze, he noticed a small silhouette racing into the courtyard. Ram? Normally, she was not one to show emotion on her face, but he could see a sense of quiet tension on her as she ran. Had something happened?
For me, at that moment in time, it was fortuitous salvation, a golden opportunity to forget my conversation with Wilhelm. I looked at Rem's haste and agitation with relief. Or maybe that was because I had suspected where things had been headed.
Subaru, we need to talk.
When Rem stood right before him, her serious expression made his heart tremble.
But I would never speak to another about the anticipation I felt in that moment.
It would appear that you have already heard.
Krush and Ferris were together in the reception room, waiting for Subaru and Rem as master and vassal. Subaru, last to enter the room, couldn't deny he felt late to the party as he shook his head a little.
I haven't heard the details yet. Seems like Rem only has a vague idea too.
When Subaru's eyes shifted to indicate Rem beside him, she dipped her head with a tense expression and said,
What I have felt is only a result of the consciousness I share with Sister. Sister's clairvoyance would be able to gather more details about the situation, but
Rem lowered her eyes as her words trailed off, looking dismayed at her own powerlessness. Rem's reply caused Krush to exhale in apparent admiration.
shared consciousness. I've heard of this. That close relations from a select few humanoid species, such as twins and blood relatives, can understand each other's thoughts without requiring words. And you can do this, from the royal capital to a place as far removed as the Mathers Dominion. As already stated, it is a vague thing. Powerful emotions and words that one wishes to convey very strongly can be related. However,
As Krush sat, Ferris adopted a casual posture behind her, his kitty ears quivering.
From how Mew put that, Mew must have felt something pretty unsettling over that telepathy, right?
Subaru, put off by Ferris's demeanor, shifted to stand in front of Rem.
Don't keep us in suspense here. If you know anything about this, say something. Don't just leave Rem twisting in the wind like that. Spill the beans already. Besides, intelligence doesn't come for free. You're just a patient and a guest, Subaru. Why should we tell you anything? You!
Properly speaking, Ferris was right. Even if he was a guest on the surface, Subaru's position was that of a patient and an outsider. He could insist it concerned him all he liked, but since he was part of a political faction, only a fool would toss him a bone just because he'd begged for it. But as Subaru cursed his own shallowness, it was Cruz who rebuked Ferris.
Ferris, do not be unkind. There is no reason for you to play the villain here. All toying with Subaru Natsuki will earn you as an angry glare from Rem.
5.
Cruz, still seated alone on the sofa, motioned for Subaru to sit in the chair opposite her.
Self-reflection leads to personal progress, but that depends on the time and situation. I would like to prioritize trade-in opinions here and now. How about it?
Sure thing. Hate to take a free ride, but I really want to hear what you have to say.
Subaru accepted her offer and sat with Rem standing at his side. Cruz began.
In the Mathers Dominion, that is, in the fiefdom of Marquis Roswal, dangerous activities have apparently been reported around his manor. Part of the domain has already been placed under lockdown at the Marquis's command.
Subaru's brows rose at the unsettling language.
Dangerous activities? Lockdown?
The fact Rem's telepathic connection had been triggered had prepared him for bad news, but even hearing the details made unease churn within him.
We do not actually know what is occurring within the Mathers Dominion, but I can hazard a guess, given that the Marquis's support for Emilia, in other words, a half-elf, as a royal candidate has come to light.
What? You mean the serfs are on strike? They're complaining left and right.
When Subaru voiced the first misgivings that came to mind, Cruz easily agreed with them.
That is quite possible, of course. The infamy of the Witch of Jealousy makes prejudice against half-elves a battle she cannot avoid.
Once again, Subaru couldn't allow the circumstances of her birth to be her shackles. He was growing to hate the faceless mob that talked trash about Emilia without knowing anything about her as a person.
Your rage is surely misplaced. She chose this path, knowing what she would face.
Misplaced? You mean me or those people? So, what, they're kicking up trouble in Roswell's fiefdom for a stupid reason like that? Are these little brush fires that'll burn out, or is it going to turn into a massive firestorm?
Setting aside whether the reasons are petty or not, the summary is sound. This also explains Rem's telepathic reaction.
Cruz turned to Rem as she spoke, drawing all eyes to the previously silent girl.
The feelings I am picking up from Sister are partly unease and largely anger. I believe she did not mean to convey these things, but did so subconsciously. Do these shared sensations between you occur with great frequency?
No, it is quite rare. We are always controlling our thoughts to a certain extent. I believe that in this case, Sister transferred these things to me in spite of self-restraint.
When Rem reached the latter half of her explanation, she could not conceal the anxiety color in her words. It was not an exaggeration to say that Ram had the most mental strength of anyone at Roswell Manor. A crisis that could shake even her restraint was clearly no small matter. And yet, beyond what Ram had let slip telepathically, she had made no effort to call for Rem's aid.
It's like she's trying to keep us from getting involved. The only explanation I could come up with was that Ram had told Rem of the danger over their mutual link without calling her sister back, because she intended to convey that information to Rem and avoid letting me know. Did she want to keep me out of her problems to that extent? But she's in trouble, isn't she? The situation was bad enough that it had reached Crucia's ears. They're camped in the capital. As was typical, there were few that Emilia could count on, and she had enemies numbering beyond reason. In such circumstances, who would take her side without some kind of ulterior motive? The answer was no one. After all, there was nobody currently at her side who would be her staunch ally. She had left behind the one who would have. No doubt, when Emilia realized that, she would regret what she had done. That was why.
Subaru lifted his head and murmured with determination,
I've got to go save her, don't I?
This time, all gazes fell upon him. Crush raised one eyebrow, and Ferris softly closed his teasing lips. Then Rem tugged on Subaru's sleeve with a nervous look.
And no, Subaru, you mustn't.
The anxiety and mournful pleading in Rem's eyes startled him. She continued,
You must do as Lady Emilia and Master Rosewall have told you and concentrate on your own treatment. I, personally, agree with them. You must focus on healing your body for the time being.
If I do that, stuff will happen that can never be undone. Rem, it's like that time back when we talked before going into the Demon Beast Forest. We've got to do something.
Rem's expression stiffened in pain at Subaru's words. They had spoken like this in the past, just before entering the Demon Beast Forest to rescue the abducted children. Subaru had said the same things to Rem when she tried to stop him. Those actions had consequences. As a result of his decision, the children had been rescued safe and sound. That was why Rem knew very well what was behind Subaru's resolve now. Keeping Rem at bay as she clung to him, he shifted to look straight at Crush.
It's, as you heard, Crush. Rem and I will go back to the to where Emilia is. Until things are settled, I'll have to put off the treating.
Subaru was delivering his verdict as a member of his political camp when Crush curtly interrupted him by calling out his name.
Subaru Natsuki.
Subaru's breath caught under Crush's penetrating gaze. His heart beat much harder. He had the sinking feeling that he'd forgotten who he was dealing with. Then she coldly stated,
If you leave this place, it means that you've become my enemy.
Subaru felt those words as keenly as a blade slicing into his flesh. Then, when the meaning began to dawn on him, like a laceration just beginning to ache,
What do you mean by?
Let me correct your misunderstanding. My treatment of you as a guest, and Ferris's healing you is the result of a contract.
Seto.
Yes, a contract for your care between Emilia and me. My house has received collateral in exchange for treating you as a guest. However...
As her words trailed off, Crush put a hand to her chest to indicate herself.
The circumstances before the royal selection, when the contract was formed, and now are different. Now that we are publicly political enemies, I must take great care in any negotiation with Emilia's camp. It is the same for the contract governing your treatment. If there is any violation of its terms, I have no obligation to uphold an agreement formed before the commencement of the royal selection, now that it has begun in earnest.
To Subaru's ears, the word contract that she kept repeating sounded like promise. It sat very poorly in his chest, mingling with his memories of parting ways with Emilia. Crush pressed on.
In these circumstances, your departing from my residence would be a violation, a unilateral abridging of the contract midway. After all, though there is no enmity attached, Emilia and I are enemies.
Subaru's mind couldn't catch up with Crush's blunt declaration of war. He understood that the Duchess and her people were enemies on paper. He barely finished saying to Rem that he was sorry for leaving himself defenseless in the manner and would adopt the right mindset going forward. And yet Subaru had yet to fully grasp what that meant. The person standing before him was the greatest enemy standing in his and Emilia's way.
I did have it all wrong. I thought for a little bit that we might be able to be friends or something. Was just dumb talk over drinks. If you can do something, do it. I was a fool to take an enemy's words at face value. I'm being petty. Tripping up your opponent is the right thing to do.
The same hazy sense of alienation that he had felt at the Royal Selection Conference seeped into his chest. Subaru saw his memory of their conversation over drinks the night before in a new light and felt betrayed, since it was Cruz herself who had told him to do whatever he could. To stand in his way despite those words, was that not a betrayal? Ferris, silent to that point, spoke as if he couldn't stand to watch.
Don't misunderstand. Mao!
His sharp look made Subaru bite his tongue and swallow his words.
Lady Cruz isn't acting out of malice but kindness. It wouldn't hurt her at all if Mew left to return and try to help Lady Emilia.
Ferris, stop.
But Ferris brushed off Cruz's rebuke and glared at Subaru.
No, I will say it. For such a minor Meow's understanding, it's far too cruel, so someone has to say it. Subaru, going will do nothing to change things. It's pointless to go. On top of that, you'd be wasting Lady Emilia's contract, which she paid for with a fair sum. After the humiliation you went through at the Royal Palace and what happened with Julius at the Parade Square, you still don't get it. Staying put, hoping for the best, and focusing on healing your body is the far better choice.
Subaru heard something, the sound of something snapping inside himself. He'd been stuffing his anger into a sack within him, and when he realized it was now open, Subaru was seized by such a rage at the humiliation inflicted on him that his teeth cut into his lip. Those provocations were more than enough to harden his resolve.
I've decided I'm returning to the mansion where Emilia is. It's been a short time, but thanks for your hospitality.
As Subaru spoke his farewells, Rem shouted to hold him back.
Subaru.
But he held up a hand to Rem as he rose from his seat, looking down at Cruz. Cruz folded her arms and closed her eyes. He had no idea what was inside her heart.
No respect for others' feelings. Should not a good man take warnings at face value? Your warning let me make my decision. Thanks.
Ferris apparently gave up on discussing the matter after Subaru returned his sarcasm. Instead, Cruz unfolded her arms before looking at him and resuming the conversation.
Subaru Natsuki, unfortunately all of this house's dragon carriages for long-distance transportation are already assigned to other tasks. All that I can lend you is a slower freight carriage, or a mid-range carriage that would require you to dismount and go part of the way on foot.
Subaru's eyes widened. He'd expected her to berate him for unilaterally breaking the contract, but Cruz almost sounded like she agreed with Subaru's decision. The unexpected reply made Subaru's eyes nearly bulge out of their sockets. She raised an eyebrow with a questioning look before turning toward Ferris.
Ferris, did I say something odd?
Even fairies dazzled at how incredibly you can adapt, Lady Cruz. But, you aren't actually going to lend Subaru a dragon carriage, are you?
Cruz nodded in the affirmative.
It is as I said. I respect the decisions of others. No matter what the decision, it is very important to take responsibility for it. And no matter what burden you bear, you must work to achieve what you want to achieve and bring no dishonor to your soul. Is it not so?
Yeah, it is. That's exactly it. I don't want my soul to become shameless. If that girl's in trouble, there's no way I can stay here as a patient and spend my days without a care in the world.
Cruz's affirmation made Subaru uncomfortable, as if he had been gearing up to fight an opponent that didn't plan on doing battle. Perhaps Subaru had conveyed his resolve, because Rem closed her eyes, seemingly berating herself for a single moment. When she opened them again, she had returned to her normal neutral expression.
In place of my master, let me extend my deepest thanks for everything you have done to date.
I don't mind. There is benefit to us as well. However, I would like to speak to you concerning the last leg of the journey.
Rem lowered her head, treating Cruz's offer with great courtesy.
If I may be so bold, we would be grateful for the help. We wish to confirm that the Dominion is safe without a moment to spare. However, time is short. It will no doubt take 2.5 days to reach the Mathers lands from the royal capital.
Over 2 days? Why? When we came, it didn't even take half of 1 day to get here. If my memory was correct, the dragon carriage left Roswell Manor in the morning, arriving at the royal capital just past noon. Even without a long-distance carriage, the disparity in the length of the journeys was too extreme.
That's impossible now. The Lifas highway we used to get here cannot be used currently. The season is poor, and fog is covering the road,
Therefore, we must take a detour around it.
So what if there's fog on it? If we just cut right through? That...
It's the white whale that makes the fog, Mew know. If Mew stumble across it inside the fog, your life is gone. That's just common sense, right? Subaru scowled at the unfamiliar term white whale, but Rem set aside the fact that Subaru didn't understand and proceeded with the larger discussion. As a result of her negotiations, they came to the following terms. Subaru and Rem would borrow a medium-range dragon carriage from the House of Karsten, and then board some other dragon carriage at a village along the way to return home as fast as possible. Subaru gritted his teeth over the inconvenient lack of a dragon carriage that could go the whole way without stopping. It was times like this that he painfully missed cars, something that needed only fuel to make it run farther. It was a bad situation that made him want to hurry, but hurry he could not. The fog that covered the highway seemed like a manifestation of the worry spreading before his eyes. The sense that this was a looming bad omen wouldn't stop pricking at Subaru's heart. Once the plan had been hashed out, things moved quickly. In short order, Subaru and Rem were headed toward the front gate of the Cruz Villa with their luggage, yet there was already a vehicle awaiting them, stripped of all ornamentation to lighten it, with a single red-skinned land dragon drawing it. Wilhelm was holding the beast's reins as he awaited their arrival. When he noticed Subaru and Rem rushing over, the aged man bowed deeply.
This is the fastest land dragon that this house is able to lend under these circumstances. Even so, I dearly regret that it is inferior to the long-range dragons employed by the Marquis. Steed.
With Rem taking the reins, Subaru stood beside her and looked at Wilhelm.
I'm immensely grateful you're lending me anything at all. I'd love to say I'll return it for sure, but...
His tone dropped at the end. Wilhelm was the only one to see off Subaru and Rem at the front gate. They had said their farewells to Cruz and Ferris at the entry hall of the mansion. The least he could do was politely return the dragon carriage later as a final parting of ways.
In my position, I can but obey Lady Cruz's decision. Once you depart from the mansion, my master and your master will no doubt become mutual enemies. This dragon carriage will serve as a parting gift for the half-fulfilled treatment and sword instruction.
But that's... I don't think they said one word about that when we left the mansion.
At the very least, the farewell from master and vassal suited them almost too well.
I pray your efforts shall be valiant, and that you will strive to make your choices proudly, without shame to your soul.
With Lady Cruz being this nice to Mew, you'd better make up with Lady Emilia in a hurry. Now get going already.
That last sentence probably left the strongest impression. There hadn't been any hint of the kind of consideration he felt from Wilhelm, but...
I, too, serve Lady Cruz, so I am somewhat familiar with my master's way of thinking.
Incidentally, when did you start working for her?
Believe it is just over half a year now.
Hey, that's way shorter than I thought. From how you talked about it, I thought you'd been master and servant for years and years.
Rem was piling luggage onto the dragon carriage while Subaru and Wilhelm traded words in that manner. Rem took the reins again and gave the land dragon's snout a gentle stroke.
Understand? Then do as I say. That's it, good boy. Good boy.
Rem, how's it looking?
He seems to have a slightly wild disposition, but I have just instructed him who is on top, so there shall be no trouble. I believe he will obey my commands.
Gotta establish the hierarchy. You really know how to crack the whip, huh?
As a result of Rem's conversation with the land dragon, they seemed to be getting along. Given the fact they'd be racing together for over a day's worth of time, the relationship between driver and land dragon was crucial. Rem discussed their plan.
Taking a detour across the plains to avoid the fog, we should pass through 2 villages on our way to the Marquis' lands. We can likely procure and switch to another dragon carriage at a village named Hanamas near the border.
Incidentally, how long till we get to Hanamas?
It will likely take 14 to 15 hours. If we run the dragon carriage into the ground after we switch, we might be able to arrive at the fiefdom in another half a day.
Subaru scratched at his head, biting back his words of dismay before bowing his head to Wilhelm.
Thanks for everything. It's a shame to leave practice half-finished like this.
I believe I have taught you the most important things. Beyond this, if you desire to increase your skill at the bud...
ReZero by Teppei Nagatsuki, produced by Six-Tail Novel with Artail AI. If you are interested in creating your own audiobook like this, visit Artail AI and claim free premium with code Artail.
Sword, there is no better way than to continue swinging one. May you stay in good health?
Wilhelm offered his hand. Subaru accepted it, and the two exchanged a good, hard shake. Rem took over the driver's seat as Subaru entered the small carriage, poking his head out of the window. He gave one last wave to Wilhelm, who was seeing them off from the front gate.
Well, we're heading out. If fate allows, I'd love to spend some time together again.
If you enjoy being welcomed with blows from a wooden sword, come back any time.
Wilhelm gave a gentlemanly smile as he saw off Subaru and Rem with a very fitting joke. The land dragon neighed and began gently picking up speed. The carriage accelerated further, leaving the Krushvilla farther and farther behind them. The figure at the front gate kept his head bowed until Subaru could no longer see him. They headed downhill, passing the guardhouse that formed the entrance to the nobles' district, heading straight down the main street to the gate that linked the royal capital to the highway outside. That was their destination. Thanks to the land dragon's blessing, the vibrations in Subaru's rear were exceedingly soft. He nervously looked out the small window, unable to bear the sense of urgency inside him. Leaving the streets of the royal capital behind, his field of vision was dominated by green grassland and blue sky, and nothing else. Since Rem was concentrating on driving, he couldn't speak to her, so there was nothing for him to do while in transit.
Inside the carriage, I sank into a sea of thought. Krush had declared that they could not lend a dragon carriage for long-range use. Accordingly, the feel of the passenger seat was much shoddier. It was probably for rushing servants from place to place. I'd entered and left the Krush residence in the blink of an eye. The fact that the Duchess had kindly lent me a single dragon carriage upon my departure left me in a tangle of complicated thoughts that were difficult to put into words. Only the night before, I judged her as strict but not indifferent. The back and forth before my departure had only added to the complexity. What I did understand was why many people wanted to converse with her. No doubt Emilia would have to work hard to build up a network of personal connections as Cruz had. That was a necessary hardship for her, yet unnecessary ones burdened Emilia as well. That's why I need to get over there and fast. Of course, these were political questions and a matter of connections between people of privilege. I did not have such an inflated view of myself as to think I would be of help with those issues. I knew there would be difficult problems where I would be nothing but dead weight. But it wasn't in me to use my powerlessness as a reason to cast aside someone I cared about when she was in trouble. If I poured my heart and soul into it, I was certain that I could overcome these obstacles. Subaru Natsuki possessed that power. Nothing will work unless I'm with her. Now she'll understand that. It was unfounded certainty. No, it was nothing but hope. Emilia had fallen into peril. If I was there, galloping to her rescue, somehow everything would work out. That was my slender, flickering hope, in danger of being snuffed out by the wind. I wanted to prove my worth. I needed to. If Emilia was in distress, I would save her. No, that's how it had to be. I needed Emilia to fall into peril so that I could discover my own value and show others that I had worth. That's right. It's no good if I'm not with her. For sure.
In the back of his mind was the incredibly lovely girl with silver hair. Her smiling face was enveloped by an amorphous darkness, buried by malice attempting to quench her sublime spirit. With that vision in his mind, Subaru closed his eyes and bit his lip. In the carriage, he silently let the time pass alone. With the exception of Rem in the driver's seat, he was isolated in that place, unable to sense the presence of any other, and he never noticed the faint twisting of his lips. Late that day, instead of Hanumas, where they had planned to switch carriages, they rested at a stopover town ahead of it named Flor. Rem had suggested it as the sun was setting, just before night began to fall.
Traveling by night will increase the probability of encountering bandits and demon beasts. I am also concerned about passing close to the fog, so I believe it's best to lodge at a nearby inn tonight.
How long is it to the halfway point at Hanuma's? We can't just rush the rest of the way there.
It would take until midnight to arrive at Hanuma's from here. We might not be able to get an inn, and procuring a dragon carriage is difficult in the middle of the night. So...
That's true. So it's not like we can just get there and everything will work out then.
Rem had been thinking while Subaru was mulling things over. Naturally, she had made her proposal with much deeper consideration than Subaru's. Though he was irritated at having to stop, he accepted Rem's suggestion.
So let's get an inn here in Floor and head out first thing in the morning. That'll give the land dragon some rest and maybe cut down on the time needed to find a carriage in Hanuma's.
Yes. If we leave early in the morning and things go well in Hanuma's midway, we just might be able to make it to the mansion before nightfall tomorrow.
As Rem replied, her voice was filled with relief that Subaru had accepted her proposal without complaint. Fortunately, their hope of finding an inn upon arrival in Fleur was granted. They entrusted the land dragon to the stable adjoining the inn, filled their bellies with an exceedingly crude evening meal, bathed briefly, and dove into bed so that they could rise immediately at daybreak.
But when I thought of Emilia, my sense of urgency and impatience drove off all drowsiness. Can't sleep.
Desperately trying to doze off, all he ended up doing was blindly changing positions in bed over and over. After all, he'd spent quite some time at Roswell's mansion and Crush's villa, the finest lapse of luxury that world had to offer. The hard bed of a backwater inn made it hard for him to sleep. Of course, given that he wanted to wake up as early in the morning as possible, curses for time and his own body welled up his chest, he didn't need more time to think. What he needed was an opportunity to link the conclusions drawn in his mind to tangible actions. Thus, all he yearned for was the morning sun. How many times had he glared at the ceiling and at the backs of his eyelids? How many times had he turned in bed? A sound slid into his eardrums, a knock at the doorway, then someone hesitantly opened the door.
Subaru, may I come in?
When he lifted his head and looked over, he saw Rem's upper body leaning into the room. She'd slipped out of the servant's outfit he was used to and had changed into a thin blue nightgown he'd seen at some point before. Rem, realizing Subaru was awake, looked relieved as she headed toward the bed.
What's wrong? If you're here to say you feel lonely and can't sleep by yourself, it's a hard day for it. If I was a little calmer, I'd have a really good laugh at that. But right now...
That proposal makes my heart flutter, but no, I could not sleep, so I wanted to talk a little.
I see you too then. Well, nothing we can do about that, huh?
Subaru crawled out of bed as Rem timidly sat down by his side. Feeling like their shoulders were close enough to touch, he turned his attention to her pale face and opened his mouth.
I feel bad that you've had to take care of me ever since we left the mansion, Rem.
Please do not apologize for that. I do not think of anything as hardship if it is for your sake.
Her strong shake of her head pricked at Subaru's conscience. He knew that was what Rem would say. Ever since the demon beast uproar, she had been his ally through thick and thin. Ironically, she was probably the one who most understood his worth.
Finding out by telepathy must have made you way more worried about the mansion than me. And here you are worrying about me on top of that. We still don't know that anything's happened, right?
Rem nodded stiffly in reply to his question and lowered her eyes.
Don't worry about it. I'm sure something rough has happened, but she's not cute enough to fold that easily. We'll get back soon. I'll manage to take care of it somehow.
Subaru smiled with unwarranted cheerfulness, trying to lessen even a little the burden weighing Rem down. He wanted to make her feel at ease. As was typical for him, Subaru's claims were baseless. It wasn't as if he had some brilliant, tangible plan to overcome difficult obstacles. Anyone ought to have doubted a declaration like that. And yet...
Yes, I believe you, Subaru.
Rem smiled pleasantly at him with relief, as if 10,000 cavalrymen had come galloping to her aid. Realizing that her smile had captivated him, Subaru's face reddened as he averted his gaze. He'd said something embarrassing, and her acceptance of it had been equally shameless. Subaru immediately turned his back to her without continuing. He didn't know what Rem must have thought of him. His breath caught when he suddenly felt the weight and warmth of her body against him.
I wonder, why are you hugging me like this?
The soft sensation against his back and her breath made Subaru unconsciously slip into a more formal form of address.
Because I want to.
The answer she gave in response, rich with meaning, carried a warmth that set off alarm bells in his heart. Behind Subaru, still sitting on the bed, Rem had her arms around him, as if to cover him up. Her feminine softness, sweet scent, and arms around him drenched Subaru's entire body in warmth.
This feeling is...
Subaru, sensing it from head to toe, tilted his head when he suddenly realized that the warmth Rem was imparting was something apart from body heat, greatly resembling something he had felt over the past several days. In reply to Subaru's misgivings, Rem maintained the contact and opened her mouth.
I am healing your gait, the same as Master Felix did for you, Subaru. After all, I had several opportunities to watch while standing right beside you. Compared to Master Felix, perhaps I cannot do much more than put you at ease a little, but...
Treatment! Treatment! Yes! I see. Yes, exactly! Ha! Ha!
Feeling embarrassed at his impure delusions, Subaru glossed things over with a hollow laugh. He felt Rem's smile slightly behind him as the strength of the mana flowing into him increased.
Whew! Incredible! This feels way better than Ferris's stuff ramming into me.
Thank you very much. But that assessment is unfair to Master Felix.
Not at all. I'm totally serious. It feels good and makes me feel... sleepy.
Maybe the effect of the treatment was inferior to Ferris's, but Rem had far greater consideration for her patient. He felt like he was immersed in warm water, wrapped in softness. He felt comfortable, relaxed, and drowsy, so he did not catch Rem's faint whisper.
That is most likely the difference between our feelings toward you, Subaru. Subaru.
His head was slipping down when Rem brought her lips close to his ear.
It's all right to fall asleep. I'll lay you down in bed properly, cover you with blankets, and leave after I've had my fill of watching you sleep.
I wasn't worried about my belly being out in the open, and that's quite a line at the end. But when you're working so hard, how can I fall asleep in the middle of it, Rem?
It was petty stubbornness, but he didn't want to come off as rude after everything she'd done. He sensed Rem beaming as he felt her hands touch his head. The warmth coming from her palms increased, making his eyelids even heavier.
Oh, crap. Why am I mean, it's hard for you too, but Rem, why are you doing this for me?
He rubbed his eyes, irrationally resisting the drowsiness, continuing to speak to hold on to his consciousness.
Rem, why so much for me?
Because I want to. I do not need any other reason.
I let go of my mind before her words really sank in. Even so, I heard Rem reply, I want. That part was important. That was probably the starting point for all the thoughts enveloping me. What would happen when I returned to the mansion and reunited with Emilia? I was full of anxiety. She'll yell at me at first, won't she?
Subaru's eyes fell as he shook his head. As he wobbled, Rem's arms gently embraced him to provide support.
It'll be all right, Subaru. You're a wonderful person. With time and a proper meeting, if you tell her how you feel, I'm sure she will understand.
Is that so? Guess I am. For you to think like this about me.
Sound grew distant. No, his mind had begun to withdraw from reality. The comfortable drowsiness coursed through him like a curse, his eyes closing to become a cage around his mind. Just before his consciousness completely slipped away from reality, Subaru thought he felt the faint touch of Rem's lips against his neck as she said,
So please keep me in a little corner of your thoughts, and don't go anywhere else. Subaru? Anywhere else? Subaru?
Subaru no longer had the mental strength to reply to the seemingly pleading whisper as his mind gently sank into the darkness. What woke Subaru up was the feeling of hot sun rays burning his eyelids. He remained lying in the bed as he absent-mindedly lifted a hand to block out the sun. The light entering through the room's large window was strong. With him covered in bed up to his shoulders, they made him so hot that it was hard to sleep. He indulged in that feeling for several long seconds before enough blood flowed into his half-asleep head for him to realize.
The sun's up?
Subaru threw off his blankets, leaped off the bed, and sprinted to the window. When he pushed it open, a cool breeze flowed into the room, and he gazed dumbfounded at the sun watching him from high in the sky. That sight struck him with the terrible truth.
No way! At a time like this, am I an idiot?
Having arrived at the despairing conclusion he'd overslept, he rushed with all haste to Rem's bedroom next door in the inn. Subaru knocked furiously on the door before throwing it open.
Rem, wake up! We massively overslept.
Cursing the fact that he'd slept nearly half the day away, he scanned the room in desperation. Anyway, he had to get Rem up so that they could resume their march. Or so he had thought. Rem? The room was completely empty. There was no bulge on the bed. The sheets were untouched. Subaru had a bad feeling about the lack of evidence that anyone had been in the bed at all. The room held no warmth from a human presence. Unable to even see any luggage, he ran out of the room to the inn's front desk. The innkeeper who had greeted him and Rem the previous evening was sitting at the desk smiling sociably when he noticed the boy.
My, good morning. It would seem you slept very well last night.
Subaru did not return the innkeeper's courtesy, slamming his fist on the desk to drive his question home.
What happened to the blue-haired girl who came here with me?
The innkeeper reacted with surprise. Seeing Subaru's expression, he raised his hands in an attempt to mollify him.
Dear guest, please calm down. You will disturb the other patrons.
Answer me. Where is she? Where did Rem go?
Your companion? Who came with you on the dragon carriage late last night?
That's not an answer.
Cowed by Subaru's threatening demeanor, the innkeeper practically shouted his reply.
Hear me out. She left on the night. She left on the same dragon carriage you came in on. She paid for your stay and left a bag for you on the way out. She actually paid enough for you to lodge here for several days, so there's no problem whatso.
No problem, you say.
The innkeeper had tried to take care not to provoke Subaru, but the words he chose enraged him further.
There damn well is a problem.
Raising an angry voice, Subaru slammed his arm against the bag on top of the counter and clutched his head. Welling up inside him was distrust, doubt, anger, sadness. The irrational feelings wrestled with one another in his head as Subaru tore at his black hair and looked up to the sky.
Rem? What? What the hell are you thinking?
The fact that even the person who knew him best had failed to understand him weighed down on him as he wailed in despair. To Subaru, by the time you read this letter, you will no doubt be quite angry with me. I will not ask you to forgive me for leaving you to head for the manor. However, please understand, it is dangerous to bring you to the mansion as you are now. I am thinking not only of the state of the mansion but the state of your body, Subaru. Therefore, please wait for me here in Fleur Village. I will be back for you when everything is taken care of. I have left behind all the money. I have already paid the innkeeper thoroughly, so you can stay for several days without any trouble. Please take care of yourself, and please wait until I return. I beg you. From your Rem.
I've been betrayed. Rem, you idiot.
When Subaru read the letter accompanying the bag left for him, he spat in irrepressible rage. He was sitting on a hard sofa in a lounge on the first floor of the inn. No one else was around. The reason for that was his prolonged violent behavior. The innkeeper who had led him to the lounge hadn't even been able to look him in the eye when answering his questions. A wise decision. That moment, anyone who appeared in Subaru's line of sight was his enemy.
And I thought, at least you understood me.
The letter was written completely in carefully penned iScript. Subaru, who was still learning the written language, couldn't read anything except iScript characters. Rem had been considerate in that sense, but in light of her abandonment of him, that only shoved Subaru's heart deeper into darkness. The letter overflowed with concern for Subaru's well-being. But so much sadness filled his head that he had no chance to realize that. He gleaned only one thought from reading the letter.
Does even you think I'm useless and powerless, Rem?
His conversations at the Cruce residence, his dialogue with Rem the previous night, and Emilia's lecture in the royal capital came rushing back to him. Words upon words piled on him in their voices, berating Subaru for his helplessness and incompetence. He brushed them all aside and seized the perfect opportunity to prove to them Subaru Natsuki's value. Or so he had thought. He'd thought that at least Rem believed he was worth something yet.
Yeah, I get it. You're telling me that I'm dead weight, so you're cutting me loose. And if I don't believe you, you want me to look at how much I've been relying on you.
Subaru spat, clenching his teeth as he rose to his feet. The luggage and the allowance Rem had left were lined up on the table in the lounge. There was quite a lot of money in the sack. Apparently, Roswell had left a small fortune in Rem's hands. With that much money at his disposal, Subaru wouldn't have any trouble with daily necessities for quite some time. He knew that was exactly what Rem had in mind when she left it with him. She underestimated him. Did she really think she could betray his trust, leave him with nothing but money, and expect him to meekly kneel and submit? There was no way he'd do as she pleased. No, Subaru was coming up with all kinds of ways he could use money to break the stalemate.
If I hire a dragon carriage and driver, I might be able to get to the mansion. That said,
Reem had made careful preparations to trip up any such plans Subaru might have. According to the innkeeper, that village didn't have any establishment that could lend a dragon coach. In addition, the appearance of the fog had thrown off the schedules of carriages that regularly connected the various villages. There was no dragon coach at any price. No doubt Rem had begun planning everything out as soon as they'd lodged at that village inn the night before. It was as if she was laughing at Subaru's paper-thin knowledge, politely smashing his options flat one by one, all to strand him in that village, and stop him from returning to the mansion.
then I'll just have to hoof it. That's stupid. I don't have a map, and I can't deal with monsters.
If bandits or demon beasts appeared, that chapter would be over. He'd seen world maps several times over, but he didn't know the local lay of the land. Wandering around aimlessly would reduce his chances of arriving at the mansion to practically zero. It was all a result of his own ignorance. Subaru's lack of education and strength kept letting him down. He had never anticipated having to deal with bandits and demon beasts to begin with. The fact that he'd never carried even a single sword on him was proof of that. He'd had Wilhelm instruct him in the art, but he could do nothing with that training if he set out empty-handed. Subaru hadn't taken such normal, prudent measures because he was relying on Rem. The price of an overnight stay at an inn was far less than the fare for a dragon carriage. Even if he had a small fortune, his inability to procure something of value made it worthless. It was the cost of his lack of education, which was the direct result of Subaru's letting numerous opportunities to study slip away.
Well, I can't help that now. I've got to do what I can with what I have.
Subaru himself was the root cause of the stalemate keeping him penned in. His knees bounced in annoyance as he tried to pretend he wasn't well aware of that fact.
So no hoofing it. I have to get a dragon carriage. There's gotta be a way. Think.
Subaru put a hand to his forehead, desperately reviewing everything he'd seen and heard in that world and everything he'd learned from the people in his original world, trying to come up with a plan. He ran through every memory and shred of knowledge in his head, focusing all his body's resources above his neckline. Then he looked at the possibilities that might exist for breaking out of his cage.
This village has no establishment that can lend a dragon carriage. The regularly scheduled carriages aren't available, meaning maybe there's someone who came in on their own dragon carriage, like Rem and I did, who stopped over.
If anyone were to enter and leave the village freely, they would have to have their own means of transportation. That very inn had stables for the use of its guests. His thought couldn't be far off the mark.
To have a dragon carriage, you'd have to be rich. No, a merchant would be perfect. A merchant who hasn't settled down is either working for someone else or a peddler going around with a horse-drawn wagon. That's just basic.
The lantern light of Subaru's extinguished hopes began to flicker once more. To find the right person, Subaru immediately went to the innkeeper and explained. At first, the innkeeper was reluctant, but he introduced several merchants, albeit with a strained expression.
But most traveling merchants will be intent on shipping goods to their destination. I don't know if any would be willing to take on someone as a passenger.
Well, I'll give it a try anyway. Thank you very much for telling me about them.
Thanking the considerate innkeeper, Subaru visited the traveling merchants one by one. But in line with the innkeeper's concerns, negotiations proved very difficult. Just as he had claimed, they had little inclination to alter their travel routes, but the situation was far dearer than that. Each and every one responded to Subaru's suggestion the same way, shaking their heads.
The Mather's Dominion. Sorry, but I can't go there now,
Said a very scrawny man as he ended negotiations with Subaru. He stood with his canopy dragon coach as his eyes lingered on Subaru with some sympathy.
I hate to say this, but I don't think I'll be the only one saying no. In my case, though, it has to do with the cargo I'm carrying.
Cargo?
I'm transporting weapons, armor, and other metal wares. Rumor has it prices in the royal capital for this stuff are through the roof. So tomorrow I'm rushing there with my dragon carriage. My profits are on the line.
The man patted the cargo in his dragon carriage as he spoke, gazing distantly in the direction of the setting sun. Then, when he saw the slump of Subaru's shoulders, he adjusted the position of his bandana and said,
There are a lot of people who use this as a stopover to the royal capital like I do. That's why this village is pretty well off for its size. So there are merchants who come in 2s and 3s, but they'll probably all turn you down.
Yeah, you're the sixth one to say no.
That's because every decent merchant is rushing to the royal capital with revenues on the mind. No way around it. After all, there's the uproar over the royal selection. Everyone's caught the scent of gold.
So that's how it is, huh?
The man's reply and sober expression made Subaru frown as he surmised the reason for his successive failures. Namely, he'd misread the merchants from a business perspective. It wasn't the prospect of a temporary payday that was luring them to the royal capital, but the sight of bigger, longer-term profits. For a trader to abandon such plans to accommodate Subaru would be nothing short of madness. The merchant continued.
On top of that, there are all kinds of fishy rumors about the Mather's dominion flying around. Even if you find someone who's not heading to the capital for profit, they probably still won't go.
Fishy rumors? Related to the royal selection by any chance?
Groundless speculation, I think. There's talk that one of the candidates is a half-demon and the lord of those lands is supporting her. But I haven't heard the details of the election yet. Do you know anything?
No, I don't know much about it.
Subaru lied on the spot because he didn't want to be exposed as a related party, which would only make negotiations harder, but covering for Emilia's lineage still left a strange feeling in his heart. As Subaru grimaced like he'd swallowed a bitter pill, the man suddenly clapped his hands together.
Oh, that's right. I just remembered someone who might accept your proposal.
Seriously, I was pretty much at the point of giving up and falling to the dark side here.
I'm not sure what you just said, but it's true. Come on, I'll introduce you.
The man patted Subaru's shoulder with an easygoing look and beckoned him forward. Subaru followed a little behind him until he pointed to a building across the road.
I'm pretty sure he's been there since last night. Wait here, I'll call him over for you.
The man left through the wide-open double doors as I watched him go, looking up at the sign. I feel like it probably says tavern or something. I had only moderate confidence since the sign I was looking at was written in row script, which I had only just begun to learn. The faint whiff of alcohol wafting from the entrance made me about 89% sure I was right. The energetic way the man headed in suggested the people inside would be troublesome. What is this person doing, glugging alcohol when he's traveling? Doesn't this world have laws against steering dragon carriages while under the influence? Back in my world, you'd lose your license with one violation, not that I was sure there were dragon carriage licenses to begin with. If the newcomer in question showed up looking drunk and dangerous, I resolved to make a run for it and spend as much money as I needed to do so.
And just as Subaru hardened such tragic resolve, the man came back outside.
Sorry for the wait. Here he is. Hey, Otto, introduce yourself.
The man roughly dragged along a young man, practically tossing him forward as they approached. He had gray-colored hair and looked no more than a year or two older than Subaru, though he was a fair bit shorter. He had a slender and fairly symmetrical face. Subaru deemed that, at the very least, this was not the drunkard he had feared.
My name's Subaru Natsuki. Sorry to drag you out here. I heard that you just might accept my request. So, you stink. You totally reek of booze.
His efforts to get negotiations started on the right foot were immediately short-circuited by the scent of alcohol wafting from the other party. The young man before him glowered sullenly, giving off a stench so strong that Subaru's stomach was on the verge of emptying itself. He might not look scary or dangerous, but he was a tottering drunkard nonetheless.
Why, hello, Hick. Let me introduce myself. My name, Hick, is Otto Hick.
He hiccuped 3 times during his brief greeting, his face red from drunkenness. The young man named Otto looked between Subaru and the other man.
So what is it that you wanted? Business? Was it business? Is? My business is? Hick. My business is? Hick. Ha ha ha, Hick.
Finally, Otto squatted down and suddenly burst into laughter. Subaru, sensing that was the sound of his hopes grinding to a halt, shot a hard glare toward the man who'd introduced them. On the receiving end of that gaze, the man quickly pointed back at Otto.
Wait, I didn't deceive you.
If you actually meant for this to be an introduction, I'm seriously doubting your head's screwed on straight. It's not fun getting arrested for drunk driving. A student would get sent to the principal just for being in this state.
Subaru had salivated at the prospect of finding a solution, and yet the man introduced to him was a drunkard. The man sighed at Subaru's words and roughly shook the squatting Otto's shoulders.
Otto! Hey, get up, damn you! You're the one who told me to introduce you to anyone who could turn your situation around. What, you're going to let booze ruin it all?
A way to turn things around?
Otto's ears quivered, while his eyes, dead until that point, completely changed. With the support of the man's hand, he rose to his feet, as if his drunken state had never been.
I have been most impolite. My name is Otto Suwen. I am a humble independent merchant making his way in life as a traveling peddler.
Otto faced Subaru and assumed an expression so crisp one could almost hear the snap to attention. While Subaru was speechless at the instant turnaround, Otto examined him from head to toe.
I see. It seems that he has a certain degree of status. He certainly has the makings of a good customer. Mr. Katie, thank you very much for introducing us.
Sure thing. You'll be all right from here out, yes? I'll get going then. Don't forget to keep your chin up. And you owe me one, Otto.
Otto had brightened to the point one would doubt he'd ever been in his drinks, so Mr. Ketty patted his chest with relief and departed. Subaru watched the man who had made the friendly gesture leave before turning back toward Otto. The young man had scrutinized him and acknowledged him as someone he could do business with. Otto clapped his hands together, smiling broadly, and began.
Well then, let us talk business. What is it that my customer desires?
Subaru's breath caught, knowing he could not let him or that chance escape, and he got down to brass tacks.
This is a bit of a far-out request to make, but...
With that preamble, Subaru explained the situation, careful about what not to say. If Otto said no, he was finished. He spoke as naturally as he could despite his tension as he talked business. And then, after Subaru gave him a simplified explanation of events, Otto thought about it a little, then nodded.
I do not mind accepting that at all.
Hearing his well-formed reply, seemingly coming from an entirely different person than the one brought before him, Subaru grabbed him with both hands in surprise and gave him a good hard shake.
Thank you. I see, you'll do it. That would be a huge help. Seriously, a huge help.
Oh! Ow! 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 Do not squeeze so hard. P, please wait. I'm glad that you are satisfied, but I have conditions too.
Otto freed his captured arms from the shaking and retreated a step from Subaru as he spoke. The word conditions made Subaru tilt his head. Now that his hands were free, Otto gave a light wave.
My dragon carriage is a resource for my business, or rather, my lifeline. I cannot part with it lightly. Of course, this will be lending aid rather than formally loaning the carriage, particularly because there are many disquieting things happening in the Mathers lands at the moment.
That's only natural. I won't go as far as to say you can jack up the price, though.
Subaru was a little worried that he'd be subject to price gouging. All he could offer was what he had on hand. If that wasn't enough, he'd have to get the price cut somehow. Seeing Subaru's wariness, Otto gently loosened the corners of his mouth.
I suppose not. Then for all the money you have here, yes.
And so, Otto struck first in the negotiations, seizing the initiative as he thrust his conditions to the fore. No doubt he'd already deduced from Subaru's demeanor how much money was in the bag. He pressed his strategy, firmly controlling the pace of negotiations to enhance his own profits even a little, just like a textbook merchant. It was mouth versus mouth, tongue versus tongue. The battle had begun, a verbal clash pitting the speech and business acumen of both parties against each other. Well, not quite.
Is that okay? All right, I'll hand this bag to you then. Can we leave right away?
Shock overcame Otto as Subaru readily handed him the whole bag. The weight of the purse made Otto swallow as he nervously looked at Subaru.
Wah! This isn't how it goes. Normally, both people lay out their demands and then start the negotiations to find common ground. Don't they? It's never this ease.
It'd be a waste of time, and I'm not going to win any verbal sparring matches anyway. There's no meaning in fighting a pointless battle, and if what's in that bag is enough, you'll be granting my request regardless.
If all the money he had on hand resolved everything, it was a bargain as far as Subaru was concerned. Otto scowled at Subaru's calm demeanor, probably wondering if he'd been too hasty.
This is, perchance I've been introduced to a very troublesome individual.
Relax. I don't intend to cause you any trouble. Not on purpose, anyway.
Are you aware that the way you phrased that only makes me even more concerned?
Even Otto, a man he'd just met, was indignant at his exceedingly unconvincing statements. However, he sighed in apparent resignation and adjusted his grip on the bag in his hands.
Understood. I presented my condition, and you immediately accepted. I do have pride as a merchant, after all. Just allow me to see exactly how much money this... What doesn't tossing what is this fortune here? What are you doing handing off something like this so
Checking the contents of the bag, Otto was so surprised at the amount of money that his nausea returned. As Otto squatted, Subaru stood behind him, clutching a fist as if he finally had hope in his hand. So many obstacles had been placed in his path, but he'd overcome them all somehow. He still didn't know the true nature of the obstacle blocking Emilia's path, but if he stood at her side, he'd no doubt find out. And that was the kind of problem only Subaru could solve.
Just wait. Soon.
The twisted smile on Subaru's lips was plain for anyone to see. That smile might have come over him from the thought of fulfilling his objective of saving Emilia. Perhaps it had another cause. Even he didn't know, since he didn't even realize he was smiling at all. Subaru enjoyed the gentle rocking as he gazed at the rolling landscape. The sky on the verge of evening was dyed orange. Soon night would fall. Normal travelers would be preparing to camp or lodge at a nearby village at that time of day. It seemed that only the likes of Subaru and Otto would choose to set out when they did.
So the destination is in the Maffer's domain, the Marquis' own mansion, on the condition that we ride right through half the night to shorten time as much as possible. I accepted it because a fee is a fee, but this is reckless, you understand?
I don't want to hear it from a guy who instantly changes his mind at the sight of money, please. My future's riding on this.
I'll do my best. My own future is riding on this too, after all.
As Otto spoke, he guided the land dragon with the reins as it raced across the ground. The dragon carriage Otto owned was a large canopied vehicle for hauling freight, so his land dragon was correspondingly huge and powerful. Subaru was concerned that such an apparently heavy beast would lack in speed, but Otto had explained.
It makes up for that with endurance. This is an especially hardy species even among long-distance land dragons. It could run for 3 days straight without getting worn out.
You'd think running for 3 days straight would wear out the people riding it instead.
2 years ago, I had to do that to not let a particular business opportunity slip. Humans can go through a lot if they're ready to risk death to achieve it. Having said that, I keeled over just after trade negotiations were over, and I hovered between life and death for about a week afterward.
Like you're ready to risk death, huh?
As Subaru watched the side of the merchant's face, Otto looked toward him with a look that seemed to say, "What?" Subaru silently waved him off, averting his eyes to face forward as he put his elbows on his knees and his chin on his hands.
I'm quite sorry. I never imagined I'd be carrying a passenger, so I never prepared proper seating for one. One side done. Hi, one side done.
Hey, I'm the one who pushed for this, and I don't mind a little pain in my butt. That blessing keeping the wind from tossing me around is more than enough for me.
Otto's Dryden carriage, meant for the simple objective of hauling cargo from place to place, had no extra space for passengers to ride. Naturally, that left Subaru with no choice but to sit next to the other young man on the driver's seat.
If you get sleepy, it might be a little rough, but please use the wagon. I have to camp frequently myself, so I have a number of blankets on hand.
That's very gracious of you. So since I don't have to switch dragon carriages anymore, we can just leave Hanuma's aside and keep on going, right?
That is correct. As a stopover, Hanuma's is more affluent than Fleur, but I have plenty of food and water as it is. This is an urgent request after all, so we'll bypass it.
No doubt he was very accustomed to traveling. Though they had set out on their journey without a plan, Otto didn't show a single shred of concern as he kept his grip on the reins. Otto himself had probably already traveled this route several times over. As Subaru watched the side of his face, he sensed a gravitas that belied the great similarity in their ages. Subaru bit his tongue as he unwittingly compared the difference in experience and courage between them.
Hey, why did you agree to this anyway? I have no idea why you said yes.
You just came right out and asked a very difficult question, Mr. Natsuki.
From the side, Subaru saw a strained smile on Otto's face, but the amiable atmosphere soon returned. Since he had arrived here, Subaru had rarely been addressed by his family name. Feeling a bit strange at being called that for the first time in forever, he realized that he'd thrown a fastball straight at something the other party didn't really want to discuss.
Well, can't take it back now. Confess, and things will go easier for you.
Yes, officer. I didn't mean to do it, honest. Wait, why does this feel like I did something wrong? I didn't mean to do it. It was an accident.
Otto followed up his exaggerated reaction to Subaru's joking comment by slowly turning his head with a sullen look.
The wagon behind us is filled to the brim with my cargo. What do you think is inside?
Now that I'm looking at it, seems like vases or something. What, were you carrying artwork?
Clothes, but not quite. What I'm selling isn't what's outside, but what's on the inside. The pots are filled with high-quality oil. Originally, I planned to haul these to the northern nation of Gusteco, but
Otto's shoulders slumped, his abject expression making plain that things had not gone as expected.
I wonder if it is an effect of the royal selection. The path between Gusteco and Lugunica has been temporarily closed. I tried to plead my case that I couldn't get my goods to market, but they ended up chasing me away with swords.
In a country as cold as Gusteco, you should be able to make a killing selling oil, but it was more of a great wasteland than a market. To add insult to injury, Otto had sold off metal wares at fire sale prices to buy the oil he could no longer trade. As a result, he'd forfeited an excellent chance to sell metal wares on top of losing access to the market where he would have sold the oil instead. This was apparently why he drunk himself into a stupor.
There's no way I can sell a large amount of oil like this in Lugunica for a fair price, and if I sell it at bargain prices again, I'll be bankrupt. And so, I was halfway to throwing my life away when you appeared, Mr. Natsuki.
And what I paid you makes up for your losses.
I can sell all this oil at any price and stay solvent. It will certainly let me keep working.
Otto clapped his hands together to convey his earnest thanks to Subaru, but Subaru waved off the gesture.
Cut that out.
He was equally grateful to Otto. If anything, Subaru's feelings ran even stronger. For a while, they went back and forth. It's all thanks to you. No, thanks to you. I'm here only because of you. Yeah, it's fate that we both met, and so on as their bond deepened. Finally, their casual praises died off, and silence abruptly fell between them. Subaru's gaze shifted from the road they were galloping down to the plain, continuing as far as the eye could see as he murmured, and silence.
Hey, Otto! Can't we cut across this plain?
Hearing Subaru's suggestion, Otto slapped his knee as if it was the best joke he'd ever heard.
My, that's too much, even for a jest. When the fog falls on the plains, that's where the white whale appears. It is the most famous of all demon beasts. Should we meet it? Our lives will be forfeit.
It's that dangerous? No one tries to put it down.
No, because by avoiding the fog, you can also bypass the white whale, so the damage is minimal. I imagine that is the real reason why it persists to this day.
In other words, people had tried to subdue the beast and failed, with the damage sustained in the process discouraging further expeditions. Complicated thoughts enveloped Subaru when he heard the words demon beasts. To him, a demon beast meant an Urugurum, like those he had encountered fairly recently. The same creatures that had gravely injured Subaru and perished at Roswell's hands. He had something of a history with them.
White whale, huh? So it's shaped like a whale and white-colored, then?
According to witnesses, at least. Apparently it is so enormous that no one has ever seen its full size, and those people were tossing anything and everything aside as they fled for their lives while it rampaged. A frightening story. A frightening story.
Otto concluded. He shut his mouth and would say nothing more. For a merchant like him, the white whale was no doubt an odious being indeed, since its loitering on these plains for days on end would throw travel schedules into great disarray. Though he would be grateful if someone got rid of it, he had no intention of encountering it himself. Perhaps Otto's point of view was common to all merchants. Subaru changed the subject.
So how long is it going to take to get to the Mather's Dominion at this pace?
Let's see. Though night is coming, my land dragon has excellent night vision, and there's no sign of any fog. Plus, I imagine there are no bandits willing to risk their lives by working near the plains right now. So, if things go well, tomorrow morning perhaps?
After providing that answer, Otto glanced over at Subaru, who raised his eyebrows in response. Otto quickly played innocent, averting his eyes and going, nothing. He soon continued, though.
Our destination is the mansion of Marquis Roswell, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
The small fortune you paid me, those clothes must be expensive. This is just between us, but who are you, Mr. Natsuki? Are you involved with the Marquis somehow?
Subaru understood why Otto harbored such misgivings to the point of meekly raising his doubts. From the merchant's point of view, Subaru's identity was a complete mystery. And yet he'd pushed a small fortune into his hands and proposed they rush to the mansion at a time when the rumors swirling around the place were uniformly bad.
That's right. I'm involved with Roswal the Marquis. You might have heard some strange rumors, but I don't know what's true or false yet. And I already told you, I don't intend to cause you any true.
No, no, I'm not worried about that at all. It's just, that, according to rumor, the good Marquis is famous for his eccentric interests. I was wondering if it is true.
If what is true?
Subaru inferred from Otto's equivocation what he wished to ask. Even so, he concealed the hardness of his voice as best he could while prompting Otto to carry on.
If the good Marquis really is backing a young half-elf lady.
Figures, the inside of my chest sinking in dismay. The anxiety in Otto's voice made it clear that he was nervous to learn the truth. Emilia's birth was about to be slandered again.
Subaru spoke quickly to head off his prejudice.
Even if I told you no, you would find out for yourself soon enough. It's true. The candidate the Marquis is supporting is a half-elf, but that girl's nothing like you all think she.
Is that so? I'm so relieved.
However, Otto's reaction was not the one Subaru expected. The merchant lowered his brows and put a hand to his chest in apparent relief. Realizing that Subaru was gaping at him in shock, he smiled awkwardly, visibly embarrassed.
I'm sorry, getting worked up all by myself here. I mean, when I heard those rumors, she seemed an odd person to champion.
To champion? Emilia, you mean?
Lady Emilia is her name? Yes, well, you know. A half-elf would have had a hard life until now in various ways. For someone to rise from an unpleasant background and stand as a royal candidate, yes, it's very impressive.
Otto's eyes were distant as he watched the road, his voice quivering faintly. Listening to the merchant's reply, Subaru realized it had thrown him completely off guard. Complex emotions thrashed around in his chest, leaving him unsure of what to say. Otto, unaware of the chaos in Subaru's heart, rubbed his nose with a finger as he said,
These might be small concerns compared to those of someone like Lady Emilia, but I know what it's like to be misunderstood. An odd point of sympathy, perhaps. I think becoming king will be very difficult, but if she tries hard, maybe. Well, I just wanted to ask.
Otto cut things off there, since going any further would require him to speak more about himself. Once again, Subaru found himself unable to say a word to Otto. He folded his arms and continued looking downward. Normally, Otto's words would have helped Subaru so much that he'd come right out and thank him. Emilia had irrational obstacles blocking her path. However, even in a world filled with such problems, it didn't mean that everyone hated her. Some people in that world like Otto would cheer for her when they learned about her background. To Emilia, that fact had to be the greatest silver lining of all. It had to be, and yet, for some reason, Subaru was unable either to communicate his gratitude to Otto or to keep down the incomprehensible aching in his own chest as the dragon carriage continued to sway.
Forward! Mr. Natsuki, please wake up! We are finally entering the Mather's Dominion!
Subaru, curled up under a blanket in the wagon, opened his eyes as Otto called his name. He hadn't been able to sleep much. His head was still hazy when he poked it out of the curtain, and he was greeted by the rays of the morning sun, a line of mountains, and hope. The sun had risen once again, pouring sunrays down among the mountains and making Subaru squint. In the half-day and change that they had spent in their overnight journey, Subaru had arrived back at the Mather's Dominion.
Good job, Otto. Working like a horse while I was asleep like that?
Can you not say that as if I have no professionalism here? More importantly, there is a village named Earlham near Marquis Mathers's mansion. Yes!
Otto had a map spread across his lap, glaring at it in the road ahead as he asked the question. His eyes were a little bloodshot from the all-nighter, but fortunately, he didn't seem worn out from it.
It's my second all-nighter in a row with some spirits in me in between, but I feel great. If we head straight forward, we'll reach the mansion after all. Perhaps.
Are you really all right? You didn't take some weird drug to forget about being tired or something?
Do not be concerned. Lugunica is a law-abiding country that bans medicines of that nature.
Subaru warily watched Otto, who seemed to be straddling the line between lucidity and insanity, as his own heart lightened a little at having returned to the Mather's lands.
I'd love to run straight there without a break, but we might pass by Rem along the way.
Nah, I don't think so. She did have over half a day's head start on us after all. More importantly, Mr. Natsuki, shouldn't you prepare yourself for returning to the mansion? You should comb your hair and so forth.
Otto raised a hand as he spoke in a half-joking manner. Subaru was putting his hair back in order when his breath caught. Now that the mansion was so close, right in front of his nose, all the things about a prospective reunion that Subaru had tried not to think about came rushing to him with a vengeance. He thought it unlikely that she'd simply welcome him back with open arms. After their parting of ways at the royal capital, he'd deliberately abandoned the half-finished treatment for his gate to return. Rem had surely arrived first, and ignoring her admonishments too, meant he might have no allies at all. But whatever they might think of him, even so.
I came back to do what I have to do. I'm not ashamed of that at all. I'm not wrong about anything.
He said it to justify it to himself or perhaps to make excuses to someone who wasn't even there. He murmured similar things over and over as if they were the magic words that continued to sustain his spirit.
It's for Emilia's sake. She can't get by if I'm not here.
Such were the arguments that kept Subaru's fragile mind from crumbling, somehow suppressing the words that would otherwise be ever present in his memories. They entered via the highway between the hills, traveling along the road at a safe speed. The road cut through the mountain forests ahead of them, with increasingly familiar scenery. At that pace, it would be less than an hour before they arrived at Rose Wall's mansion. The instant Subaru felt the carriage stop, the land dragon's blessing must have cut out, since he keenly felt the full impact as the vehicle rocked to the side. Subaru yelped as he was suddenly jostled around inside.
Otto! What was that just now? We haven't gotten there yet, have we? Why'd you stop all of a sudden?
Otto held the reins low as he spoke to Subaru without looking at him.
Mr. Natsuki, can we make this as far as I perceived with you?
For a moment, Subaru couldn't process what had been said to him, but then he immediately grabbed Otto by his lapel and pulled him close.
What do you mean? That wasn't the deal. Damn you, we've come this far. Don't cut and run out on me midway. Stay with me until we get to...
The end, Subaru was going to shout, but his breath caught when he saw that Otto's face was as white as a ghost. He released the pale-faced merchant, who sat on the driver's seat and hung his head.
I am very sorry. I had intended to remain with you until the end, Mr. Natsuki. Even so, I don't have the courage to go any farther.
What are you going on about? What does this have to do with courage? Just a little farther and we'll reach the mansion. It's not like the road is bad. Otto, please!
Even if you beg me, I cannot. I don't need the entire reward. I shall return half to you. Therefore, please allow me to pull out of our deal.
Otto put his hand on the driver's seat with a genuinely apologetic look toward Subaru, though still refusing to get into the details. Subaru couldn't hide his bewilderment at the tragic look in Otto's eyes.
What is it all of a sudden? Did something happen?
My land dragon is afraid, and it's not only that. The area around us seems too quiet to me. This is why traveling merchants use land dragons. A land dragon's instincts tell him about places he mustn't approach.
Otto's hands trembled on top of his lap as he focused on his land dragon. When Subaru peered closer, the land dragon made quiet, ragged breaths as it awaited its master's command. But the way it was snorting at the direction they were traveling announced loud and clear that it held danger for them. That behavior and Otto's trust for his own land dragon explained where the merchant's reaction had come from, asking Otto and the land dragon to accompany Subaru when none of them had any idea of what situation awaited them.
Thanks for everything. Sorry to put you through something scary, Otto.
Eh!
Subaru heard a surprised voice behind him as he hopped off the driver's seat down to the ground. The land dragon beside him looked back up at Otto, moving a foot around as it silently pled its case.
I'll head to the mansion on foot from here. Hey, I've come this far. It's practically right in front of me. You've brought me far enough. Take all the money and go.
I cannot do such a... No, more importantly, Mr. Natsuki, you mustn't go. Come back with me. Fog is approaching this place right now.
The white whale's gonna show up?
To a traveling merchant, this is a black omen. When fog covers our destination, it is a matter of life and death for us. No, that doesn't matter here. Anyway, please, Reconti.
Sorry.
Subaru wore a pained smile after Otto shouted his concern for him. He was far too much of a softy for the cutthroat, deceptive world of the merchant. He pondered the benevolent Otto's suitability for his chosen trade as he walked away from the dragon carriage.
Just like you're weighing your life and money on your scales, I'm weighing my life and something I value just as much. Something worth that much to me is waiting just ahead.
Mr. Natsuki, please wait. Let's discuss this. We can talk it over.
I don't blame you at all for turning back. I mean, if you know there's danger, turning back is the right call. Knowing beforehand is enough for me.
Now Subaru knew that the road ahead, as well as his destination, held enough danger to make even a land dragon afraid. But he had to hurry, he had to run forward. The chance for Subaru to find the answer he sought surely awaited him there.
Mr. Natsuki.
Thank you.
Otto's voice held concern for Subaru until the very end. Leaving him behind, Subaru rushed full tilt down the tree-lined highway. He headed for his destination, casting aside the man who had guided him without trying to overcharge. The sight seemed almost familiar to him, but it was only a resemblance. Just how far did he have to go before arriving at Roswell's mansion? One way or another, running down the road would lead him there. With the danger loud and clear and his destination right before his eyes, Subaru's emotions ran wild inside him. At any rate, he wanted to get there without a moment to lose. If he did, the painful, lingering emotions inside him would come to a head. He'd settle this, whether it turned out how he wanted it to be or not.
The hell?
Subaru was running without a care, or rather, while suppressing his innumerable worldly worries when he came to a halt. It wasn't because he had arrived at his destination. The scenery remained unchanged, and it seemed to stretch on so much that he had to wonder just how far the highway continued, with the thick trees on both sides seeming to block all escape. He was out of breath, but he had yet to run out of endurance. Why, then, had Subaru stopped? That was because
It's too quiet, isn't it?
Subaru had paused because he sensed something was wrong. Unintentionally, he repeated what Otto had said earlier. When he looked around, there was no change in his surroundings whatsoever. Compared to the rustling of leaves as the wind passed through, his own breath was quite noisy. But that was all he heard. And to Subaru, who'd spent nearly 2 months in these lands, it felt wrong. The oppressive silence without even the sounds of insects was abnormal. And then, something suddenly appeared, slipping neatly into Subaru's consciousness to loud. So, at even the sounds of insects was at even neatly into Subaru's consciousness. It's dawning as though it felt wrong with
What? What? Ah!
He recoiled a step, his throat tightening from shock. Without a sound, a person had appeared in front of him. Furthermore, the figure's entire body was shrouded in black clothing, with something like a hood on, so that even the face of this complete stranger was concealed. Furthermore, that wasn't all that shocked him.
This guy? No, these guys.
One after another, black figures emerged all around Subaru, as if they were responding to his confusion and his shifting gaze. In the blink of an eye, they numbered more than 10, surrounding Subaru as if mocking his efforts at caution. Particularly abnormal was the insane quiet that continued even after the shadowy group's appearance. They continued to watch Subaru in silence. He didn't even hear any of them breathe. There was no way they were friendly. That said, they hadn't shown any hostility either. The eerie figures left him tongue-tied, unable to even move a muscle. How did they stare at each other like that? Feeling the pressure, Subaru felt like time was moving incredibly slowly. Then, that turbulent silence crumbled just as easily as it had begun. All at once, the figures faced Subaru and reverently bowed their heads to him.
Ah!
Subaru's brain was unable to process the scene before him. The incomprehensible band that had emerged was paying Subaru respect for reasons unknown, and leaving him behind in his confusion, they began sliding out of sight. The wordless scene before Subaru's eyes left him more dumbfounded than anything. Rather than do something to the frozen boy, the figures departed with silent footsteps. It was probably the silence of their footsteps that had allowed them to slip through Subaru's mental blind spot. But though he understood that much, he knew absolutely nothing else about them. Subaru tossed aside any attempt to comprehend the figures, suppressing the worry churning around inside him as he continued to run. He focused on heading back to the mansion, as if doing so would shake off the fear and discomfort. He didn't understand who the figures were or what they were after, so he stopped trying to understand them. That was why he never noticed it. Why he never noticed the fact that the unknown figures sliding out of his line of sight were headed in Otto's direction. Nor would Subaru reflect on this later. Not even once. His thoughts had stopped as he ran forward, as if he truly believed that it would save him.
Worry. Worry dominated my entire body to the point that I wanted to tear and scratch at it. My feet moved forward. My heart was set on the future. The destination of my mind was ahead of me, and yet I felt like fear of those unknown figures was stalking me from behind. My ears were ringing loudly. Nausea was rocking my head. I felt like every drop of blood in my body had turned into muddy water. The anxiety that tormented me was rapidly eclipsing everything within me, making the physical organ housing my formless heart feel like it was going to burst. Why did it have to be like this? Everything seemed to be going well. Everything seemed to be going in the right direction. It was just a twist of fate. It was merely the timing that had been thrown off. I should have been able to do it. It should have been clear so that I could do it without hesitation. The stuff at the royal capital was just a bad dream, the result of simply pressing the buttons in the wrong order. That was why I wanted to meet Emilia now. I knew what I had to do. I just had to save her. She was in peril. It was my time, just like it had been before. That's how it had always been. It'd be like that this time, too. Everything would turn out all right. I would be redeemed in Emilia's eyes. She'd accept that she was wrong, that it would work out only if I was there with her. She would allow me to be at her side once more. Ha ha ha.
He was out of breath. His lungs hurt. His overused limbs creaked. His body was crying out in pain, but he couldn't just stand there. If he did that, it would catch up with him. Something irrational was chasing him from behind.
Shit! 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 I wanted to meet Emilia. I wanted her to smile at me. I wanted Rem to be nice to me. I wanted to stroke her head. I missed and adored Beatrice's insults and Ram's put-downs. Rosewall's eccentricities and pucks making the world revolve around him put my heart at ease. I wished I'd never left. I'd headed to the royal capital, but the time I'd spent there and the royal capital itself was the root of all evil. Rienhard, Felt, Old Man Rom, Ferris, Wilhelm, Julius, Anastasia, Al, Priscilla. The Council of Elders, the Knights. One after another, they rose up in the back of my mind, all of them objects of hatred at that moment. Curse you, suffer and die. Painfully. If it weren't for them, I would have never lost sight of myself. If I'd reconciled with Emilia, returning to live my days in peace, I would have obtained perfect happiness. All of it had slipped out of my hands. That was why I was there to pick it all back up. Just a bit farther, and I'll be back there.
His lungs burned with agony. Subaru averted his eyes from the regrets forming cracks in his heart as he ran. It was cursing everything and trusting that what he desired lay beyond those damnable things that was keeping him alive. Subaru had been staring at the ground as he ran for all that time, and when he could hardly breathe anymore, he raised his head. The scenery lining the road had begun to change from what he'd been seeing as he ran. The gaps between the trees were widening, and the natural traces of human labor appeared among them. When he caught sight of the rising slope of a familiar hill, a raspy voice of joy left Subaru's mouth. He could see white smoke rising above the tree line coming from the other side of the smoke. Maybe it was from cooking, or maybe it was from boiling hot bathwater, but either way, steam was rising, produced by human hands. The village. On the other side of that hill was Earlham Village, the one closest to the mansion.
We Diet Act.
Until that point, only the faces of the people at the mansion had graced the back of his mind. But now he imagined the villagers he had so dearly missed. They included the very pushy children and the astoundingly unguarded adults. These were the good people who would welcome the trivial things Subaru had brought into this world without laughing them off as absurdities. He missed their smiling faces so much that the memory of them almost made him cry. He didn't know why he had forgotten them. It was living proof that Subaru had been in this world. He had saved them. They might have been wiped out had it not been for him. It was Subaru's feat. Was there any other result of his actions he could take that much pride in? With the pillar that supported him right before him, Subaru's steps quickened. The dissipating white smoke nearly vanished in the wind. Subaru pressed on as if fearful of that very thing. Someone was there. People who knew Subaru. People who knew his worth. They were definitely there. That moment, it was enough. He wanted proof that someone cared for him, that someone had affection for him. He ran. He sprinted up the hill. When he neared the crest of the slope, he could finally see the source of the white smoke. Subaru climbed up to the peak using his sleeve to wipe off the sweat trickling down his brow and cheerfully looked at the village. And then, the nightmare finally caught him. When Subaru ran to the village entrance, his gaze shifted around to find the first citizen he could. That was when he frowned, sensing something was wrong. The moment his legs stopped, the accumulated stress on his heart and lungs crashed down upon him. He gasped for breath over and over, coughing up spit, and strived to let his body recover as his eyes searched the area. At first glance, he thought that nothing odd had occurred in the village. The air that morning was very fresh, enough to snap a sleepy person awake. It was such a clear and sunny day, and yet he couldn't sense anyone in the village whatsoever. Having been up so late, Subaru didn't fully appreciate the fact that it was still very early in the morning, enough that people might still be asleep. He slumped his shoulders at the sleepyhead villagers and moved on, searching for the cause of the white smoke. If he looked for the source, he'd surely stumble across someone. But Subaru's hopes were in vain. He didn't come across a single face. By the time he had nearly reached whatever was burning, everyone was long gone. What had once been a fire was still faintly smoldering, causing the smoke. But he couldn't sense anyone's presence. That was when Subaru was haunted not by vague anxieties but by very tangible ones. For reasons unrelated to fatigue, his breathing and heartbeat quickened. With his body reacting to that panic, Subaru banged on the door of a nearby house. There was no response. When he rushed in, it was an empty shell. No one was home. Maybe the whole family was out doing farm chores? No, he couldn't dismiss the situation with a silly joke. He rushed into the next house, searching for people. There were none. It, too, was unoccupied. An amorphous chill came over him. Subaru, realizing that it greatly resembled what he'd felt when he met the figures in the forest, almost lost himself as he desperately kept searching for a human presence. He shouted enough for his voice to go hoarse, pounding on house after house, not caring that it was splitting his fingernails. The result was nothing but silence. Subaru, all alone in the world, collapsed to the ground, powerless. No matter how often he might encounter them, he couldn't get accustomed to these incomprehensible situations. Naturally, the same went for senseless developments that he did understand. Forsaken by all, prospects grim, all avenues of escape cut off. This was always Subaru Natsuki's future. Having lost count of how many sighs he'd made, Subaru made one more as he decided that further searching was meaningless. No matter how many times he looked around the village, he wouldn't find anyone. There was no one left. Subaru rose up, brushed off his butt, and tried not to slip on the muddy ground as he stepped forward. Though there was no trace of rain having fallen, there was mud everywhere. He'd lost his footing and tumbled several times over when he'd been running around the place. So Subaru avoided the mud, bypassed anything that might cause him to trip, and headed to the center of the village, the direction of the white smoke. The fire that had caused the smoke was already out. The smoldering remnants were nearly extinguished. Subaru gently lowered his gaze, looking absent-mindedly at the remains. There was nothing odd to see, save for the charred corpse of the old man from which the white smoke was rising. Subaru scratched his head, averting his mind from the sight as he walked toward the village exit. If there was no one inside the settlement, there was no point staying there. He had to hurry to the mansion. He stepped around the carelessly strewn corpse of a young man, walking carefully so as not to slip on the bloody mud. He gave the bodies of the young couple piled on each other, a wide berth passing right beside the old woman lying face up as he entered the village square. Subaru searched for any signs of life among the numerous dead therein, seeking any salvation, anyone who might call his name. But his hope went unfulfilled, for inactivity was all that remained. Too many detours. He hadn't fulfilled his original intention, and this was the result. He'd taken too much time, and futility was his reward. Everything in that place was in vain. There was nothing there that wasn't, Subaru included. Abandoning everything as futile, he dragged his feet in a daze as he crossed the village square. As he did so, his foot abruptly caught on something, sending the half-aware boy tumbling forward, groaning from the pain of landing on his shoulder. Subaru reflexively glared at what had snagged his foot, and so he met Petra's empty, unseeing eyes. He couldn't escape. Subaru cried and screamed until his trembling voice went hoarse, a flood of tears pouring down as he wrapped his arms around Petra's remains, cast aside on the ground. Warmth had long faded from the girl's body. Rigor mortis had set in. The body of an unconscious person ought to have been heavy, but even considering Petra's youth, her body was far too light. That was probably because of all the blood that had flowed out of the gaping wound in her chest. Petra had died with her eyes open and an expression of surprise. The only comfort to be found was that the absence of pain or suffering on her face meant that she'd died instantly when her heart was impaled. After all, there was no reason for her to die with a gaping hole in her chest and then suffer in agony on top of that. Subaru laid Petra's corpse upon the ground and covered her with his track jacket, the only funeral he could provide her. He tried to close her eyes, but with her body already stiff, he couldn't grant her even that small mercy. Praying that Petra would rest in peace, Subaru trembled as he turned his back to her. He continued to avert his eyes from the hellish scene the familiar village had become. The cause of the white smoke was Moroza's charred body. The young men had no doubt fought with the swords they had. There were weapons and farm implements scattered about, with the blood of the slain villagers drenching the bare earth around them. Death had befallen the village. It had all been over long before Subaru arrived. Far too late, Subaru was now the only person to bear witness to the results of the tragedy befalling that place. He offered up both his hands, as if pleading for someone, anyone to take them. What happened? What happened? What terrible, horrible thing had occurred? Who had violated the village in a merciless slaughter of its innocent denizens, trampling upon their dignity even in death? No one still breathed. Not a single person was left alive. A memory of days long forgotten arose in the form of a carefree voice. "Oh, Master Subaru, good morning to you. Here to play with the children again?" He remembered the brash, noisy, fond, and very pushy voices of the young children. "Subaru's here! Subaru came! Subaru's all alone!" One girl had pretensions of adulthood as she made a cheeky promise about the future. "Subaru's the one who saved my life, so when I'm bigger I'm going to return the favor." He couldn't see her face anymore. His track jacket now covered it. No one was left. His memories had been trampled underfoot, shredded, discarded, lost. It wasn't sinking in. Liquid was pouring from every cavity in his face. Whether it was tears, snot, or drool, he had lost the will to hold it back as it continued to sully his face.
Nah.
Then, as Subaru wallowed disgracefully, practically drowning in tears, he came to grasp something far too late. He finally understood the obvious. There was no reason for the senseless tragedy to have stopped at the village's edge. A chill worse than any that had come before shot through Subaru's entire body. Since Subaru had fallen into that world, he had overcome mortal crises several times over. Even then, he had never known fear and despair as he did in that moment. The despair that somewhere beyond his reach the people precious to him had been taken away. His teeth chattered to their very roots. His eyes, painful from too much crying, could see little, but he raised his limited field of vision to the sky. The clear blue ether seemed innocent in the face of the tragedy beneath it, and under that sky the mansion awaited. That place he'd wanted so much to return to, that he'd yearned for. The place practically right before his eyes was now too frightening to contemplate. But whatever had turned the village into hell surely hadn't overlooked the mansion. He was scared. He couldn't help but be scared. He didn't want to think of the possibility that this something had torn through the mansion. He was afraid that if he thought it, let alone spoke it aloud, that would make it real. He shook his head, casting off the fearful images. But though Subaru tried to drive them to the back of his mind, one of them obstinately held on, whispering in Subaru's ear, refusing to be forgotten. That was why Subaru clung to it, the lowest means for him to escape. If he could voice even the possibility, the chance that something had happened to her, then...
Rem, where are you?
It was the name of the girl who ought to have arrived before him, the girl who had cared for him, who had cuddled with him, who had affirmed him, and who had betrayed him in the end. Subaru instinctively knew what it meant to call her name, and knowing this, Subaru had chosen to do it anyway. In the name of worrying about Rem's safety, he was fooling his heart with the most sordid of means. If Rem came back, she'd never sit back after that. ReZero by Tappei Nadatsuki. Produced by Six-Tail Novel with Artail. AI. If you're interested in creating your own audiobook like this, visit Artail AI and claim free premium with code Artail.
Happened to the village, excuses. It was another excuse, spoken in a place where he stood alone, and it didn't even fool him. He was the worst. He was the lowest of the low. He didn't want to understand, but he did. If he could voice the possibility that he'd lost the girl he cared for and the possibility his own heart could break, then why not offer up a sacrifice so that he wouldn't have to? Subaru told himself such lies so that he could pretend not to see his own overly unscrupulous heart. He felt like the blue-haired girl's pleasant smile, the warmth of her nestling against him, her voice that called Subaru's name, were growing further away. That's right, Rem can. Rem!
Subaru began listlessly tottering along the road to the mansion. He dragged his feet, leaving Petra's remains and the corpses of the villagers behind, covering his ears to block everything out. He still didn't know what awaited him. He thought both that he didn't want to know and that he needed to know, but he didn't have the courage to run to find out. Subaru slowly climbed the upwardly sloping path, clinging to the girl's name, like she was the pillar supporting his heart as he walked toward the mansion. Rem was dead in the courtyard. The courtyard he had seen on many a morning had turned into a hell unlike anything he'd ever seen. The small but vivid flower bed had been trampled awry, and the trees standing around the mansion had been felled, snapped in half. The green grass had been dyed black with blood, with the prostrate corpse joined by the remains of several black-robed figures. Each showed signs of being subjected to incredible violence, with few remaining relatively whole. The gruesome damage to the remains exceeded what he had seen in Earlham Village, no doubt evidence of the great rage behind the murder weapon that had turned these unfortunate victims into mincemeat. The deadly tool that had wreaked such havoc upon them, a blood-stained iron ball, lay fallen among the dark figures in the center of the garden. The metal orb, linked to a handle via a chain, had smashed apart a number of foes, but in the midst of battle, its mistress had somehow relinquished her grip. It seemed to regret having been unable to fight alongside her to the very end. And as for the demon who he presumed had wielded it one-handed in ferocious battle,
Bryn!
She was long gone from that place. In a corner of the courtyard, a short distance removed from the iron weapon, was Rem. Her servant's uniform dyed crimson red. The surface of the ground where she had fallen was drenched with a great quantity of blood that spoke of the heroism of her demise.
Looking at the large number of corpses besides Rem's in the courtyard, he knew she had fought. The fangs that had slaughtered the villagers had menaced the mansion with ill intent. She had battled hard to defeat a number of them, struggled while heavily wounded, and died. What had the group of black figures been thinking in killing Rem? Why? What did they know about her? Rem tried her best, always worked hard, always took care of others, jumped to too many conclusions, was kind and gentle and stern to Subaru. When times were tough, she was on his side, but she'd left him behind. She loved her sister and hated herself, but she'd just begun to like herself a little more, and just when she'd stopped calling herself a substitute for her older sister, just when she'd begun to walk down her own path in life, Ram!
Though he called out to her, she made no response. Though he shook her, her body had already gone cold and hard. He tried to stroke her soft hair several times over, but it clung to her forehead, sticky with blood. Subaru didn't even have the courage to turn her over and see the look on her face. Maybe her expression was bitter, locked in place as she struggled against death to her final breath. Perhaps it was peaceful. He didn't have the right to accept either. After all, it was Subaru Natsuki who'd as good as killed her. He left Rem, fallen with her arms wide to the sides, when he noticed the shed containing gardening tools. Rem's unnatural location, the shed that she seemed to be protecting, and the blood that had flowed out from under the closed door. Despite the scent of death, Subaru suppressed his nausea as he reached toward the shed. With a creak, the door opened. The next instant, the scent of overflowing blood assaulted Subaru's nostrils. He reflexively covered his mouth with his hands as he beheld the results of Rem's attempt at defense. Not a single one of the children inside the shed was still alive. Subaru fell down and pathetically crawled onto the grass, heaving the contents of his stomach upon the lawn. He thought that his overflowing tears and vomit would stop, but there was no apparent limit.
Rem had died to protect the children and failed. He thought back to the villagers who had apparently picked up arms and fought. They hadn't run either. The adults had stayed in the village so that the children could escape. The little ones had run to the manor, with Rem fighting heroically in the courtyard to protect them as they huddled in the closed shed, praying for salvation. But their prayers were cruelly, mercilessly trampled on, and then their lives were taken from them as well.
Abruptly, a cry in falsetto escaped his throat. It wasn't that anything had happened. It was simply that the forgotten terror had suddenly reared its ugly head once more. Subaru had returned to the village and the mansion in the hope of finding someone who knew him, and yet not a single living soul was left. Only the silent dead greeted Subaru. He felt like those hollow, empty eyes were saying something to him. He felt like the blood-drenched tongues in their wide gaping mouths were berating him. He felt like the blood-drenched tongues in their wide gaping mouths were...
Why are you alive? Why did we have to die instead? No, I didn't. This isn't what I wanted. He'd had an ideal. He had dreamed of a hope. When Subaru heard that Emilia had fallen into peril, he had thought it a blessing from heaven. Since she had lost all faith in him, he believed this was his chance to get back into her good graces. He believed he would save her from peril as he had done before. She would thank him, and they'd put their meager differences behind them to walk side by side, hand in hand. He had disparaged the suffering, the danger, the tragedy that had occurred as nothing more than a means to that end. He had taken it lightly, believing he could fix anything, no matter what happened. And if the cost of that was a vast number of dead bodies, it's not my fault. I didn't.
Subaru shook his head, rose to his feet, averted his eyes from the shed, turned his back on Rem's corpse, and ran toward the mansion. He cut through the courtyard, kicking in a window on the terrace and climbing through to intrude into the mansion. The dimly lit manor seemed to treat Subaru like an outsider as the soles of his shoes crushed fragments of glass. He began to run around the building, clinging obsessively to the search for another living soul.
Someone, anyone, 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 anyone.
Just as when he had run from the village, no, even baser hopes continued flowing from him.
It's not my fault. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. I didn't want this to happen, so it's not my fault. He wanted someone to be alive so that they could agree. Or perhaps the fact that someone had survived at all would be enough to affirm his claim. So Subaru kept searching for survivors. He had to find one. If he couldn't, he'd never be able to live with himself. Now faced with the notion that his own flippant thoughts had brought this tragedy about, there was no way that he could stay composed. To stop his mind from shattering and to not have to bear the burden of the multitude of dead, he required a more tangible defense.
He violently thrust open the door of the nearest room, peering in to find it empty. Dejected, he moved to the next chamber, checking whatever room was closest at hand. Subaru continued his search for the 4 people who ought to have been at the mansion. For Ram, for Beatrice, for Rosewall, and above all, for Emilia.
Come on, I'm begging you, help me, please.
Subaru's half-crying voice carried a heavy imprint of despair. Normally, Subaru would have been able to easily reach Beatrice's archive of forbidden books even without trying. Yet when he needed to most, he was unable to find it no matter how hard he looked. He wanted to hear invective from her sharp tongue almost more than air itself. Subaru, dragging his feet along in unmanly fashion, still had tears rolling down his cheeks. Distracted by sobbing breaths, Subaru continued to walk in search of the living, his own eyes like those of the dead. He found Ram's body in the room at the end of the second floor. Having seen so much death in such a short time, Subaru knew immediately that she was not asleep as she lay on the bed. Her light skin had grown so pale that you could almost see through her. In contrast, her tongue stood out for being redder than normal. Unlike how her identical younger sister had passed away, Ram, adorned by the cosmetics of death, was lovely even after her passing. Subaru had always glibly said that she'd be cute if she only kept her mouth shut. But he'd never said that out of a desire to see her like this one of the second.
She.
Subaru felt like he heard a curse. The same curse upon Subaru's life spoken by the dead in the village in the courtyard. Subaru stumbled clumsily out of Ram's bedroom and fled. He put his hands on the wall, slapping his uncooperative knees, and distanced himself as fast as he humanly could. Closing his ears, shaking his head, Subaru arrived at the dance hall on that floor. He crawled on hands and knees, stumbling several times midway, and pathetically climbed up the stairs. Ram was dead. That left 3 survivors, as if they had a mind of their own. His feet avoided the floor where Emilia's room was and climbed to the top level toward the chamber at the center of the main wing. This was Rosewall's study. The thick double doors remained shut in silence, their formidable solemnity making them seem removed from the wickedness that had infested the rest of the mansion. The doors weren't locked. He stepped inside and looked all around, feeling half resigned to the possibility of finding Rosewell's corpse slumped over the desk. Ram was dead. Ram had passed away in the mansion. Subaru himself was no longer certain if he was really looking for survivors or to find the despair that would eradicate his last hope. There was no one in the study. There was no sign of anyone having broken into the room. The desk and the writing supplies on it were just like he remembered. A slight feeling of relief took hold of Subaru, not only because he was unable to confirm that Rosewall was dead or alive, but also because there would not be another casualty to weigh upon his battered conscience any further.
No, he realized that his earlier feeling that the room looked just like he'd remembered it was off. There was actually one thing that was significantly different from his memory. Namely, the bookshelf wasn't in the same location as usual. A secret passage?
The bookshelf on the wall had slid well to the right, revealing the entrance to a dark corridor behind it. He timidly drew close and peered within, finding stairs spiraling downward. A thought rose up in the back of Subaru's mind, an emergency escape route. As a marquis and lord of the land, it was no surprise that Rosewall had such measures in place for his own protection. It was the sort of thing he'd gleefully arranged beforehand. The cold wind blowing through the secret passage suggested that it continued for quite a way down. He naturally imagined that the route was for safely escaping from the mansion itself.
If so, then Emilia.
Subaru took several deep breaths, hardened his resolve, and stepped into the escape route. When he touched the rather cold wall, he wondered what it must be made of. As he did so, it gave off a pale blue glow that allowed him to see several meters ahead. Relying on the light, he kept one hand touching the wall as he carefully followed the steps downward, making sure not to slip. Apparently, the hidden passage went underground. When he reached the end of the stairs, the tunnel stretched forward in a straight line. The source of light didn't change, leaving him relying solely on the radiance from the walls. But the feeling that he was really chasing after survivors was enough to support Subaru for the moment. Whether he himself was dead or alive seemed ambiguous to him now. The wall he had been touching suddenly ended, leaving him abruptly groping into thin air. Subaru unwittingly flailed forward and was greeted by a hall in the middle of the passage. Really, it was more the size of a lounge than a hall. Smaller than a guest room, the space was supported by unevenly distributed pillars, so haphazard that he felt like the architect had a twisted mind. Slipping past the annoying supports, Subaru sluggishly advanced. Ever since he'd gone underground, he'd felt like his limbs were stuffed with lead as languor dulled his movements. Even his thoughts were clouding. Even his memories from mere seconds before seemed vague. It was a hard battle to take even a single step at a time. His eyelids were heavy. Both his shoulders felt like millstones holding him still. Even so, a combination of tenacity, hatred, sense of duty, and madness pushed Subaru's body forward. Threading between the pillars, he headed straight forward to see an iron door at the back of the room. When he reached it, the breeze slipping between the split at the center told him that the path continued ahead.
What was I looking for anyway?
He reached out with bloodless fingertips before his stagnant thoughts could produce an answer. Subaru opened and shut his mouth as he breathed hard, grasping the door for no reason other than his sense of responsibility.
Akawa!
Screaming in fierce pain, Subaru shook his right arm as if trying to tear it off. Touching the doorknob had left his entire hand in scalding pain. Subaru anticipated further agony as he lowered his eyes onto his right hand. He saw that it was missing its index finger. Dumbfounded and astounded, Subaru lifted his hand before his eyes and spread it out. Now colored white with cracked skin, it was missing its index finger from the knuckle. The middle finger and thumb were also missing their tips.
Slowly, his gaze returned to the door. Subaru's finger was stuck to the door where he'd grabbed it. More precisely, it had ripped his finger right off. Gotta get it back on, quick!
With only that incoherent thought in his head, Subaru reached out once more to take back the finger he'd lost. But lethargy afflicted his body even more than before. His thoughts reached his shoulder and elbow, but not any further than that. Impatient that his arm would not move, Subaru tried to step toward the door, but the instant he did, his right foot shattered from the ankle down.
Fuck!
Subaru fell on his side, his voice trickling out of his throat though he was unable to form words. He didn't know if he was screaming out of pain or in a futile struggle to live. The instant he drew in breath to scream more, white frost filled the inside of his chest, and he could move no more. His lungs convulsed. In a single moment, his ability to breathe came to an end. He made short, shallow gasps, but his lungs could not expand nor take in oxygen anymore. In that perilous state, Subaru's eyes alone desperately, which stood now ensigned, he had very little feeling anywhere in his body. It was the second time he'd lost a leg, but the pain and sense of loss from its shattering were on a different level than mere severing. The right side of his torso, now the underside of him, was cracked in several places. His tongue stopped trembling as white breath came over it. Only then did Subaru realize the truth. His cheek was now in contact with the ground. If he moved his head, his flesh would probably crack and tear right off. Idimoda side midi and D summaria. He moved violently, tearing his right cheek and ear right off, but he didn't care. He spent some time repositioning his body so that he was lying face up. When he looked back at the upside-down view of the little room, he understood. Of course the pillars were in irregular locations, they weren't pillars at all. No, they were pillars, but their function wasn't to hold up a structure. These were human pillars, men who had frozen over and died. Subaru had wandered into the same white apocalypse, and his body would become a frozen statue, like the other victims. His breathing had already stopped. His limited oxygen flowed to his brain, but in the world of absolute cold, which would end sooner, his brain functions or his life. He understood nothing. He saw nothing. From the tips of his fingers, the being called Subaru Natsuki was coming to an end, replaced by a fragment of ice. Or perhaps it would have been more accurate to say it was no longer Subaru Natsuki there, but a madman wearing his flesh? Perhaps his mind had died long before, the moment he arrived in the village. He lost all feeling in his lower body. He couldn't see his arm anymore. It was strange that his brain was functioning at all. Where did one's life reside? The brain or the heart? There was no way that he would find the answer in that freezing world. In the realm ruled by nothing but white, there was a frigid murmur.
You are far too late.
And then, Subaru Natsuki shattered into tiny pieces into white crystals and vanished from the world. When the darkness split apart and he awoke, it began with the pain of sunlight burning his eyes. Warm blood flowed through his limbs. His shattered lower body was firmly standing upon the ground. Right after the first blink, all his lost mental functions seemed to return at once. His brain instantly restarted and then short-circuited from information overload, making his eyes literally spin. Where the ringing in his ears had dominated his world, the sounds of thronging humans going about their lives came rushing in. Various people mingled along the dusty road, burying his field of vision in the living souls he had so craved. Subaru stood rooted in place as the human wave parted around him. The beating of his cracked heart grew fiercer.
Hey! Hey there! You listening?
Along with a click of the tongue, the rough voice reached him from right beside him. Subaru slowly shifted his gaze toward it and saw a stern, scowling face with a vertical scar on it. The man rubbed the white streak with a finger.
Give me a break, kid. Don't just stare into space like that.
The very faint reply drew a sigh out of the man.
What's with that weak reply? Well, whatever. More importantly, something happened to you.
The speaker held out his hand with a nice, shiny red fruit sitting on top of it. Subaru came to the conclusion that the man's appearance was a truly terrible match for the person inside. It seemed surreal. Subaru remained silent as he gazed absent-mindedly at the fruit. His situational awareness was badly lacking. However, the man didn't suspect that something was wrong with Subaru, instead leaning forward as he said,
Hey, enough fooling around here. I asked, how many abbeos? Don't make me say it over and over.
The man reached over the counter and grabbed hold of Subaru's shoulder. He roughly pulled him closer, and Subaru's defenseless body pitched forward and crashed against the shelf. The man let go with a surprised look on his face.
What? What you doing? Stand up properly. Your legs are all wobbly, damn it.
The man pointed to Subaru's lower body with an exasperated look on his face.
You've got two good ones attached to your hips. What, daydreamed you'd lost them or something?
When Subaru looked down, he did have legs, trembling and shaking though they were. Since they were unreliable and unable to support his body, he was leaning on the shelves at the moment. With an annoyed voice, the man said,
I'm begging you, quit the bad jokes. This ain't normal conversation and it's messing with me.
But Subaru's body did not respond. Reality didn't register as real. He felt detached somehow, like some sort of discord had developed in the connection between his body and his soul. What was he doing there? What had happened to him? He felt like something had happened to him, but what? What am I doing here? What am I doing here? Suddenly, a girl's voice sounded in his ears.
Subaru?
Unable to speak a word, Subaru felt his eyes go wide as he lifted up his face. Behind the counter, there was a tiny silhouette standing near the stern, tall man cleaning things up. She wore an apron dress that was mostly black, with a white apron and white headdress. She stood straight with a small stature and an elegant body. With the counter between them, she turned her lovely face towards Subaru. Her shoulder-length blue hair fluttered in the wind, drawing attention to her refreshing gentle image.
Subaru?
Sobs poured out of him as his field of vision blurred. He earnestly rubbed both eyes, fearful that the clear, distinct image of the girl would fade. and yet she grew more and more distant as the murmurs loudened. Before he realized it, he'd lost the support of the counter and fallen onto the street. Unable to send strength and will to his feet, he lay there amid the pedestrians coming and going, tears flowing as he gasped with disjointed breaths. No, it was not breathing.
Whoo! Hi, 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 hi.
It was laughter. The murmurs broadened. He could tell that more and more people were shifting their gazes to him. Someone was watching him. Someone saw him. He wasn't by himself. He wasn't isolated. From this alone, he knew he was accepted, even lying there in the street like a marionette with cut strings. Rather than run around the counter, the girl leaped right over it to move to his side.
Subaru, what's wrong? Are you all right? Get a grip on.
The girl wrapped her arms around the fallen Subaru to sit him up, as she did. She felt so defenseless, and he hugged her back with all his strength. The girl accepted the embrace with astonishment. Her breath was so close, and her warmth was so comforting as he buried his nose into her shoulder and hugged her tight. Perplexed, she tried to say something.
Subaru?
Each word, each syllable, each character, each breath was a hymn to Subaru. He embraced her firmly, his arms refusing to let go. Nor did the girl stir even an inch, quietly accepting the embrace, making no move to brush him off. The warmth of her body, the heartbeats of life, made him feel that others were alive like nothing else could.
Hi, huh?
The madman named Subaru Natsuki continued to simply laugh.
To be frank, Fairy can only say that it is all over now. Meow.
His ears twitched, and he swept back his flaxen hair as he shifted his gaze away from Subaru, sleeping in a feminine-looking bed. He looked instead to Rem with a pitying look in his eyes. He continued.
Fairy can only do something about physical wounds, you see. Issues with the body are workable, whether within or without, but there is nothing Fairy can do for the mind, meow.
After Ferris's apology for his powerlessness, Rem bowed in a show of respect.
No, thank you very much for exhausting all your efforts.
But somehow, her flat voice sounded devoid of emotion. This was not like her normal suppression of her opinions. Rem's inner turmoil was simply too great and had turned into profound sadness. Ferris closed one eye in a pained look. Rem did not notice his reaction and gently leaned her head forward, shifting her attention to Subaru where he lay on the bed. They had Subaru in bed to tend to him, but that didn't mean he was asleep. Both his eyes were wide open as he stared straight at the ceiling. From time to time, he'd make a fragmented laugh, like he'd just remembered something. And when that passed, he would suddenly break into tears. In his unstable state, Subaru's torment continued apace.
Truly, the change in the boy had been a sudden one. Until that morning. No, the entire time he'd been walking with Rem through the royal capital that morning. He had been his normal self. Certainly the incident the day before weighed on him, and his behavior showed some signs that he was stressed, but Subaru was striving as he normally did. Rem deeply respected his wishes and sought to be close to him without changing his behavior. She didn't think anything had happened that could trigger this. Rem painfully regretted that the instant Subaru had abruptly changed was when she'd taken her eyes off them. Even so, she was right there at the shop, listening to the shopkeeper converse with him. Thanks to Rem's tireless efforts, the store had sold its merchandise nicely, and the shopkeeper, in quite high spirits, seemed inclined to give them a souvenir. He was asking how many apples Subaru wanted to take with him, and she remembered him answering, "How about all of them?" The very next moment, his demeanor abruptly changed, and he fell limply onto the street. When Rem sat him up, he seemed so overcome by sadness and tears of joy that he kept laughing. Deeming he wasn't well, Rem carried Subaru back to the Crucia Villa, accepting all the trouble it might cause. Suspecting it was some kind of magical interference, she politely insisted that Ferris examine Subaru. However, it had all come to naught. Even Ferris, the most accomplished healer in all of the royal capital, could not identify the cause of his sudden change. If Ferris could do nothing, it might well mean that gathering all the great magic users in the entire royal capital would still not be enough to heal him. Subaru's present condition was unrelated to magic, but his mind had suddenly become unbalanced.
Fairy doesn't really want to ask, meow, but what will you do?
Without understanding the cause, dealing with it is difficult. I am sorry to have troubled you, Master Felix.
Don't worry about it. As a matter of fact, it's better for Fairy's treatment, now that he's not making a weird fuss, in a manner of speaking.
Subaru hated Ferris's treatment and often voiced his complaints. On that level, Rem could understand how he was easier to deal with lying down and listless. The words were still highly insensitive. Ferris continued.
But is it really good to continue treatment, meow?
Rem, who was watching Subaru, lifted up her head and shifted her gaze toward Ferris.
What do you mean?
Don't be upset by my asking, meow, but the treatment for Subaru's gait is to make life easier for him, yes?
Yes.
If he can no longer live a normal life, treating him is meaningless, isn't it?
Subaru is.
The even more insensitive remark drove Rem to forget Ferris's status as she yelled. But even faced with the maid's emotions, Ferris's look of doubt did not falter.
Are you saying don't stop now, meow? Seeing him like this? Are you serious? It's true some things happened to him, but if that's enough to break him, he's not likely to ever recover.
Ferris looked down at Subaru with undiluted scorn. To Rem, who knew that this was the man to whom Luganuka had granted the title of Blue, the archetype for all water magic users, his behavior was all too callous. If someone couldn't be healed, throw the person away. That was the judgment of the kingdom's foremost healer. What did he understand about the individual named Subaru to judge that he had no prospects for healing?
Oh my, what a stare Mew have. Subaru's a lucky man. Not that he ever realized it.
Subaru's current situation is unrelated to the royal selection. He is not a person who would lose his mind over minor failures.
Believe that all you want. As far as Fairy is concerned, keeping his sanity after everything that's happened presents problems of its own, meow. And besides...
Ferris set aside his flippant tone as he looked frostily at Rem.
Don't misunderstand. Fairy doesn't hate Subaru, so this isn't meow of some kind of special grudge against him. This isn't particular to Subaru as a person. Fairy just hates people who lose their will to live pure and simple.
Ferris pointed at Subaru, and then he touched his finger to his own chin.
Even for someone with my meowgic specialty, there's no way to use that power besides healing. Fairy helps all kinds of people day after day to be of service to Lady Crush. Meow, everyone struggles hard to live, so thanks doesn't matter. But Fairy hates wasting this power on anyone.
I think that is admirable.
Thank you. But it's not right to save people who don't want to live. Even if you heal the body, isn't it just saving an unused life? If that's the case, end it before it causes other people trouble. Well, in this case it already has, meow.
Ferris delivered his blunt assessment with a stern face. Behind that hard demeanor, Rem keenly felt Ferris's sincerity concerning the many lives he had no doubt saved. His way of saying it was dismissive, but it was what Ferris had learned from watching life and death in all that time. That had informed his views on life itself.
Even so, Subaru is...
Rem, battered by Ferris's words, looked at the boy with pure regret. Subaru was unaware that he was the subject of the conversation as he made faint, intermittent, warped giggles, as if hearing these things had stirred the wounds remaining in his mind. Deep inside, Rem wanted nothing more than to lose her grip on herself, cling to Subaru and cry aloud. But that would bring dishonor to him and tarnish the good name of Raswal, her benefactor. More than anything else, it would be a betrayal of the feeling she herself had carried while watching over him. A clear voice flowed into the room, abruptly breaking the awkward silence within.
Ferris, I believe your view is just a little too strict.
Rem reflexively raised her head at the voice. When Ferris noticed the visitor, his expression brightened. After all, his eyes were always full of zealous devotion when they gazed upon her.
Lady Crush?
I do not go as far as to say weakness is a crime. I do believe, however, that condoning that weakness and wallowing in it while leaving the situation uncorrected is very much a vice.
When Rem hastily lowered her head at Crucia's arrival, the Duchess checked her with a hand. With a shake of her long green hair, she moved to the edge of the bed. Her eyes narrowed as she looked down at Subaru, who had a wicked smile on his face even then.
I see. This certainly is an alarming state. Do you know the cause?
Hearing Crucia's question, Ferris raised both his hands up as he replied.
No. According to Rem, he suddenly fell over, so Fairy examined him from head to toe, but there's no sign of any interference with his mana. Meow.
Is it possible this is some kind of curse? It is difficult to imagine, but I can think of someone taking measures against those with knowledge of the royal candidates. Or one could suspect that this is a show of force by another camp. However,
Neither is very likely, is it, Meow? There's not much time to set something up, and who'd go after Subaru in the first place? Anyone involved would know he's powerless, and there is no Meowigle interference anyway, curses included. Fairy's positive. And besides,